Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, how we doing? Welcome to another episode for the archives of the Conspiracy Farm. Jeffrey Wilson rolling with you shotgun with my partner in crime, USC Hall of Famer Patrick J. Miletich. How you doing, champ?
You know, I'm doing really good, actually, and I'm glad we've got the guest that you corralled in. And,
of course.
And our friend coming to us from Japan.
From Japón. But before we
You're
get
doing well. Did something happen today? Is this some sort of good news?
Uh-oh. Well, we are going to get to it. But before we do, I would be remiss, ladies and gentlemen, you got to go check us out at www.theconspiracyfarm.com. All the archived episodes. Support the sponsors. We got Chemical Free Body, chemicalfreebody.com/farmer. All the best in health and wellness. Gut Cleanse, Green 85, some of the bombest supplements on the planet, dude. I'm telling you that. And then we got the C4.com. Anybody representing the Second Amendment and want to do it comfortably and reliably, go check out thec4.com with killer superior designs. We have, if you're over there in Japan, like my man Ryan, and you get hit with a tsunami or an earthquake or any of the tornadoes we've been hit with, or Dorian down in Florida, you need to check out mypatriotsupply.com and specifically go to preparewiththefarm.com for all of the different specials that they have. And butcherbox.com. Obviously, we're rolling into the football season. Everybody want to get their pregame on, et cetera, winding down summer. Butcherbox.com/farmer for all the dopest organic grass-fed meats, organic chicken, heritage pork. Go check it out. And, yeah, man, I'm really stoked about this episode today, man. A returning guest, multiple-time returning guest. The guy, as everybody knows, like one of the dopest researchers and authors that, I've really seen on so many different subjects of history, not just 9/11 and geopolitics. I mean, the guy is quite the savant in a very productive way. And there's a lot we're going to talk about today, man. Obviously, with when I post this, it will be 9/11, but we're recording it on the 10th. We're going to talk a little 9/11. We're obviously going to talk a little Jeffrey Epstein, a little bit of everything. So joining us today, he is the host of the ANC Report and just a good friend of the show, man. Great guy. He's a tribesman in truth. Ryan Dawson. What's up, brother?
That was a nice intro. I got to mention that Dorian slammed North Carolina because the island where I'm from got hit pretty hard by that. And
Really?
Florida always takes the news, but us little places, we always get ignored. So Ocracoke and Roanoke and Hatteras Island got hit pretty hard. They're all parts of the United States, by the way, and
They are.
We often don't get mentioned on TV, but a lot of history down there. Our family had some damage too. So, but this is still a great day because John Bolton got fired.
John Bolton got fired, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't know. I know, whoever does or doesn't drink, that's fine, but I have a little shot of some Jack Daniels right here that I am throwing back for the removal of the warmongering piece of shit. John Bolton, NSA director, was fired today. He is in the unemployment line. Salud, ladies and gentlemen.
NSA advisor. He not anymore. I that's the first thing I tweeted to him. I say, Bolton, why do you have National Security Advisor as your title? You're not a National Security Advisor. You got fired.
Right.
That's awesome.
He needs to change his Twitter now, which is hilarious.
I mean,
Bad
we've known that
filth.
dude. Yeah, dude, we've known him to be a bad guy for a very long time. And honestly, we can talk about it. I saw some, I posted something about it today, and then, someone posted, if he was so bad, why did Trump hire him in the first place? And Pat has an interesting philosophy on that. Kind of the keeping your friends close and enemies closer type thing. He wanted to keep an eye on the bad guys. What are your thoughts? I mean,
Sheldon
why would
Adelson paid for it. That's why.
There we go. See, Sheldon Adelson.
It was on the same day he gave a pardon to Louis Libby. So he was, now and then Trump will stack the table with opposite sides, and he lets them fight with each other. And Lincoln did this, and I hate Lincoln, but this was a good strategy. All he has to do is favor one side over the other, so they both have to give him something, because he's the deciding tie vote type thing, right? But Bolton he'd sabotaged too much in North Korea. He kind of did get along with Trump on Iran, but he really blew it on Afghanistan. And we recently had this chance to remove 5,000 troops. The Taliban was willing to talk, complied to all prior demands, and Bolton went in there and sabotaged the whole thing. And so did Pompeo, but Pompeo just sort of follows Bolton's lead. So you'll see, trust me, you're going to see Pompeo's attitude change a lot without John to hide behind.
Was there something else said? Did Adelson or one of those guys say something critical about Netanyahu as well in the last couple of days?
Well, I mean, that's the selling point for Bolton is Trump actually is very pro-Israel and pro-Likud and Netanyahu specifically. I wouldn't even say Israel. I would say this faction because the Kushners and Netanyahu are friends. I mean, he sleeps at their house.
Right. And
Trump's daughter is married to one of them. So he definitely has a sort of nepotistic bias there. And so he's on that team. And that's probably what got Bolton's foot in the door. But every time, like Trump's trying to talk to Kim, the North Koreans called John Bolton the defective human product. That was the translation. And we used to call him the defective human mustache.
Well, when who was it? When Mattis met him, he was while we're walking up the steps, whatever that was. He's like, "Hey, I heard you're the most evil person on the planet. Glad to meet you." So, some nice meetings of the mind there.
I mean, Mattis hasn't met Richard Pearl yet, then, but yeah,
right.
There are a few people worse than Bolton. There's still some, but he was the worst, person currently in the administration. Like some of the leftover Bush people are worse than Bolton, and he worked for them too. So.
For sure. Well, and we're going to get more into that and a lot of these ties.
You know who else was probably worse? John McCain. Where is he? He returned to hell. That's what happened.
It's a dry heat.
We just had his anniversary death party on the 25th of August. I was in Ireland for that.
And what did I hear? John McCain never saw a war he didn't like. Well, before we go down this rabbit hole, brother, you did again, you are such a, just diligent researcher, man. You bring the pain with so many of your videos and so much of your research. And that's why, as a history guy and somebody who really likes the nuance and the layers of all this shit and seeing how all the dots connect, I really love messing with your research. And as we know, man, shows like us, shows like yours, shows like, Tinfoil Hat, shout out to Sam Tripoli, we're getting shadow banned. We're being censored. These words, there's a war on truth, if you will. And you have had a lot of issues, man, going back to your Vimeo page where they took a lot of money. YouTube hit you with strikes for just bullshit, saying it was, harassment or bullying or whatever the guidelines that it didn't infringe on.
The exact opposite of what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and then, you really put your boots on the ground, man, and your money where your mouth was because you went to Europe. Tell us about your trip to the UK and Ireland. And you were really not a fan of London when you went there, man. Tell us how everything went down and how if it was a success or not.
I was very disappointed with London, but I say these things, but of course I want to change things there. I want to help them, but man, it was it was an eye opener going there. But the reason I went to Ireland is because for tax evasion reasons and other purposes, a lot of giant corporations plop a headquarters in Dublin, and so the headquarters for all of Europe was in Ireland. And the headquarters for the Americas is over in Texas. So I had to go to one of those. I'd never been to Ireland. From Japan, it didn't matter. So we went to Ireland. And because the Asian one, they don't deal with videos in English. So went to and the most censorship in the Google sphere is from the EU and it's from Europe. I mean, you say the wrong thing at all,
right.
And it's banned in all these countries. It's like there are a lot of my videos that aren't in Europe at all, except for like Iceland, Norway, and a couple other places. The ones outside the EU.
Wow.
So, yeah. So
yeah, we put up some stuff that got banned in the UK too, specifically in the UK. Our UK fans that hit us up like, I can't see this video. So yeah,
I know and BitChute's banned in New Zealand, and it's banned on a lot of ISPs in Australia too. But if you live in Australia and you call and complain about that, you can get it reversed. So it's not the whole country, but it's a lot of internet service providers. Wow. New Zealand, after that shooting, they decided to get rid of BitChute. Even the guy live streamed on Facebook. So
go figure.
Whatever. Go figure there, right?
That's like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia supposedly attack us on 9/11, and we go to Afghanistan.
Right. Tell us about your conversation with the Google folks over there.
The Bugman, yes, that was creepy. So first of all, I couldn't get hold of a freaking human being, and I've been dealing with this crap since 2008. Right? They erased my first channel in 2008. Every video I ever did. The day I put up this video called "War by Deception," it got erased, and they took down my whole channel, and I had no means of doing anything. And there weren't even a lot of shows like this or whatever. Like a lot of these type of shows got going around like late 2000 teens or whatever.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, it was myself, Rivero, antiwar.com. No one was doing videos or anything. And so I had no recourse really, but I had a backup channel that I had made and I just didn't like the name. So because it's like RYS Sense, or the one I have now. So they're like, you can't make a new channel. Well, technically, I never did. I just kept using the original old channel.
Okay.
Move videos over there.
When you said they were even flagging your unlisted stuff and your private stuff.
Yeah, so I got banned completely in 2018 again in March, and they took down my website, my T-shirt company, my YouTube, my Facebook, like everything was gone. Ironically, except for Vimeo. But then Vimeo would ban me on Halloween. And what they do is the end of the month when they have to pay you. So the very last day of the month, they banned me and erased all my videos and took all my September profits and all my October profits.
Wow.
So, and that was my best month, September. It was September 11th. I'd just been on all these new shows and stuff, and nothing. They took it.
Wow.
So, plus there's the money I lost where I had to go find another place that could host my videos and get around piracy and blah blah blah. So really it was more than what they took is the damage they did. But
are you finding more progress with BitChute? Are you finding it's less censorship and less problem?
Oh yeah, BitChute doesn't censor my videos. It takes a long time to upload sometimes and all, but these were videos I was trying to sell, and so Vimeo was the place I could do that. And now I have to pay for the bandwidth and host it myself. I use this Norwegian company called Kling, and some people have problems with the player and it's but at least they didn't censor them.
Right,
so.
right.
Even my T-shirt company got taken down. They went after that. I had a shirt just said boycott Israel. They're like, nah, anti-Semitism. Nah. I'm like, it's not anti-Semitic. What are you talking about? But it doesn't matter. And then with YouTube, again, like in February, they gave me strikes, and I waited the 3 months, get my channel back. Start using it a couple weeks, boom, they give me 3 strikes again. So I was sick of it. I'm like, why are you flagging these for hate speech? It's clearly the ADL and SPLC or shit libs or whatever. They just don't like whatever video, and they all pile on and flag it for hate speech. Now, hate speech in their own rules says you're promoting violence towards, it should just say anybody, but instead it lists everyone. It's like, you cannot promote violence towards ethnicity, race, religion, veterans, gender, something.
Which is never even that. You know what I mean? I heard Sam Tripoli today saying he got flagged for tweeting somebody about correcting the term retard on Twitter. He was down for a week. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy.
Well, Daniel McAdams from the Ron Paul Institute got his Twitter completely permanently banned for calling Sean Hannity a retard over something. So, you're supposed to say mentally challenged or liberal or something like that.
Chromosomally challenged.
And what I put out there, that there is a new definition for retard. It no longer describes someone who is mentally challenged. It describes someone who has all their faculties but is a fucking moron.
Yeah, that's all. We know that's what it means. Like, nobody's picking on people with Down syndrome or something. They're just saying that, oh, that's retarded. Some people say, oh, that's gay or whatever. They're not talking about homosexuals. It's clearly like, it's the internet too. Like, grow up. Like, people talk shit on the internet. Woo, whatever. Someone got called retarded. I use that word sometimes. I call people who say the Pentagon got hit by missile retarded. I'm like, there's debris of the plane in the building.
Well, this gets into all that selective butt hurtness, man. And I know you've talked about it and we've talked about it. It just is so infuriating when you have people focusing and utilizing their energy to go after, I'm hearing more about Antonio fucking Brown, I think his name is, in his helmet and whatever, than more I'm hearing about Epstein. People are so more upset about and calling people racist or sexist or transphobic and all that other shit when we have global wars taking place, global black market economies that are trading in human beings and drugs and body parts, where children are being satanically abused and killed. But yet we have the energy to trip about this other dumb shit. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I hear you. It's selective outrage. And when I was on with Sam Tripoli the other day, we were talking about this sort of manufactured, like, acceptable outrage because there's no skin in the game. So, like, if I oppose the war in Libya or something, then there's a huge faction against me because Obama started that war. So they're just going to be on that team or whatever. And so the conservatives are mad about Benghazi and the liberals are mad about Fallujah or whatever. But there's no like sincere principle, like let's stop killing brown people or whatever. And the same people that are yelling racist, sexist, etc., are supporting these wars. They're saying Assad must go and supporting Al Qaeda. They're supporting open air slavery in Libya, starvation in Yemen, etc. That does because their team did it, so that's okay or something. It baffles me. I'm like, if you're a moral person, if you have any common sense, you wouldn't want to frivolously murder people. I mean, that's what we're doing. I mean, modern war is just. I see profiteering through violence.
But no, I mean, again, people's, whatever you want to call it, confirmation bias, extreme tribalism. People have so much ego wrapped up into their thoughts on geopolitics. They just have to be right. They can't take a step back. Or what?
And the Unabomber explains it.
We're going to get into that too, man. We're going to get definitely into that because I found that very fascinating when you brought that up because back in the day when I read a little bit of the Unabomber's Manifesto, and I'm going to say this out loud right now, and I'm not advocating violence or in any way, shape, or form advocating violence, but he was raising some damn good points. And this was in the 90s talking about technology. And I wound up getting into and reading it when you kind of advocated a couple weeks ago. People need to start reading the Unabomber Manifesto. He predicted the radicalization of the left. And so
you can read things from people who did bad things. It doesn't mean they're 100% evil and whatever. I mean, the guy had... he has issues. He was a child genius, forced through school very young. So intellectually he's there, and he's definitely a math genius and whatnot. But socially, you can't take someone out of their age group and just throw them in with college kids or whatever when they're 11. Like it's bad. But and he was isolated and smart people can do dumb things. But that doesn't change what he said. And same like. Adolf Hitler said the sky is blue doesn't mean the sky is no longer blue. You know what I mean? And what Kaczynski broke down on the over-socialization and feelings of inferiority, I've had people read that this year and go, oh, he's talking about Antifa. I'm like, he was talking about this way before they existed. But yeah, he kind of is nailing why they are the way they are, why it's a big group of betas and so on. It's a type of psychology. This tribalism isn't just to be part of a group or something. It's got a deeper root than that. And it's not about some sincere principle of justice. Otherwise, you'd see criticism against killing across the board or something, you know? So all this stuff that even when they criticize imperialism and the terrible things the United States or the UK has done, they don't say the same thing for communist regimes and stuff, which are guilty of just as much or more of more killing and starving and so on. It's all what they really hate is Westernism, because they have feelings of inferiority, and so anything that's associated with being rational, strong, any of these positive categories makes them feel worse about themselves because they don't want there to be a superior and inferior. So they cling on to these groups that preach equality, not in the sense of equal treatment, but just like everyone's the same.
Right.
That way that levels them up rather than
everybody has a participation trophy.
Yeah.
They certainly hate masculinity, don't they?
They hate masculinity. They hate rationality. They hate most of the core Western values that have been conducive to success in the West. And so, yeah, they can latch on to legitimate causes, legit criticism of things that have been done, but it doesn't matter, like the institution of slavery, etc. But they don't realize that it's Western civ that ended all these practices before anyone else. Women's suffrage or universal suffrage, child labor laws, the ending slavery, all these things happen in the West. First people to vote in New Zealand spread throughout the West. The first people to get rid of monarchies in 1,000 years was the West. The first people to end the institution of slavery was the West. And it spread from the West into other societies. The last people to get rid of it was the rest of the globe. So where you ought to look at the West and honor it and say, yeah, they had slaves. Guess what? So did everyone else. Yeah, they had subjugation of females. So did everyone else. How did they break out of that? They broke out of that from the Western values and Western philosophy that led to, owning your life and your liberty. And those principles are what gave rise to the behaviors that ended up dismantling all these institutions and making more fair, more free. And capitalism is the best equalizer ever.
Well, and you would think with some of these like socialists or wannabe socialists or communists, you would think that they're reading from some playbook of these just like grave successes throughout history, when almost literally that's not the case. Stalin killed, 50 million? I mean,
you
it's
never
just like
really see capitalists
China's the worst.
jumping over fences and swimming across ditches to get into a communist country, you know,
Right,
for a
right.
reason. It doesn't work. Welfare doesn't work. Central planning doesn't work, especially on the scale of 300 million people, whatever. That no one, even if they were a benevolent king or something, would have the knowledge to properly know the exact amount of all industries. That you have to let market forces and competition figure that out. Like,
Well, since you
I mean,
mentioned
even in a prison, you have market forces. You know, like,
since you mentioned
can't
welfare
get
not
out.
working, I have to bring up, got a little bit of everywhere, but the immigration stuff. Is this being weaponized to start giving people free shit to weaponize and create a voting bloc for the left to create this socialist, Marxist, authoritarian state that people warning is coming?
It's partially that, and it's partly that just the opportunity to virtue signal. Because what a lot of the hardcore leftists will do is, if you oppose illegal immigration, talking about just illegal immigration,
Right.
well, then you're xenophobic and racist and throw out all the isms, right? And for them to support it then makes them feel like, well, I'm not xenophobic and racist, and what a good boy am I, and I can pat myself on the head for doing nothing, right? Like, that's just normal to not like categorically hate people, right? But the thing is, a lot of them are racist and xenophobic, and they know they're not supposed to be. And so this is a way of them exercising their way out of it. Nobody's more militantly anti-racist than someone who's just newly getting over that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like someone that comes up to me and out of the blue says, I got a lot of black friends or something. I'm like, whoa, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Well,
It makes me think, I question, like, would you ever do that? Did someone go like, I think girls can work or something? Like,
Well,
of course.
it's like Tom Arnold when he commented one time back to me on Twitter, because my wife is an immigrant. She came from another country, and we did everything legally and things like that. So yeah, I am fully against illegal, mass entry into this country that's going on right now. But he said, "What's the matter, Pat? You worried that there's going to be a Mexican mowing your yard?" And I go, dude, is that all you think they're capable of?
Right.
That's disgusting.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing, and they the thing that's most pathetic about liberals is that they actually think minorities need white liberals to save them. Like,
it's paternalistic racism. That's what it is.
It is so bizarre, and it's crazy.
The subtle racism of lowered expectations.
Yep. Was that Thomas Sowell?
I don't know, but I heard it. I think it was 30 Rock. I heard it, and Tracy Morgan said it. He could have stole it from somebody, but that was a great point. But yeah, and you're honestly, ladies and gentlemen, check out, if you don't want to fucking read, there's an audiobook of the Unabomber, the Unabomber's Manifesto. I read some and then I listened to some at work, but it's just like, it's so, you were like, whoa, dude, did this guy just write this a couple months ago? This shit's like almost 30 years ago. When you start hearing how the social impact that he almost predicted.
Yeah, published 30 years ago. He wrote it before that.
Right. Out in the woods in Montana, there was a Netflix movie out there about him that I found pretty. He's like, why do you stop at a red light? It was very fascinating. It's kind of interesting judgments on society.
When we go back to
just skip to number 11 and read like 11 through 17. If you're super lazy, just read those 6 paragraphs and you'll be like reading the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. It hooks
so
you.
When we go back and talk about the rise of Antifa and all of this that's going on, when Jeff and I had talked previously, I was on Andrew Wilkow, the Wilkow Majority on the Blaze TV. He had me come out there to Washington D.C. to jump on his show, and we talked about Antifa. And I said a lot of the the mass shooting stuff and all this other stuff that's going on, because boys are being demasculinized. The boys are taught not to be masculine, not to be strong. They're also drugged with Ritalin and Prozac and all this other stuff. There's 40 million adults on psychotropic drugs in America alone. 40 million adults, and I think roughly probably 10 to 15 million children are on these drugs. So they are just turning all these people into zombies. And I think it's, maybe you've done the research on this, Ryan, but over 90% of the mass shootings are perpetrated by people who were raised on these drugs.
Yeah, SSRIs in particular, and paragraph 145 in the manifesto says, Imagine a society that subjects people to conditions that make them terribly unhappy, then gives them drugs to take away their unhappiness. Science fiction, it's already starting to happen. That's what he was talking about. And this is before the Prozac and Wellbutrin and all the rest of the whatever Exioms and stuff.
Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor. That was something when I came back from Japan one time and I flipped on American TV. There are commercials for prescription drugs.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
I know.
Like there's prescriptions, so they should be based on your symptoms. And then a physician says, oh, you have these symptoms. This is the drug for you. They're like, no, ask your doctor about blah, blah, blah.
And then half the commercial is you're going to bleed out of your eyes. You're going to shit spontaneously.
Yeah, it's like
possible cardiac arrest.
Suicide, depression.
Yeah.
Like your antidepressant might cause suicide.
Almost $1 billion is spent every year by pharmaceutical companies in advertising. So you think about the networks, they literally couldn't survive without those ads. The evening anchor, or Lester Holt certainly wouldn't be driving a Mercedes-Benz if pharmaceutical wasn't advertising on their station.
It's gross. I mean, just like the soap opera, what became the soap opera back in the day. Now that's why I call it now the military-industrial telecommunications pharmaceutical complex, because the level of the dollars is right up there with all this military defense shit.
I think that's why they also try to Hollywood. When I'm saying it tries to stigmatize what little masculine programs and things there are. With like whether it's professional wrestling or the UFC or whatever, they try and be like, oh, that's all for dumb redneck derps, and just the idea of the redneck, the people who actually rose up with guns and fought the federal government for labor rights. This idea of self-sufficiency and hunting and anything that has to do with masculinity is portrayed as backwards and dumb and negatively.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it started when I was a kid. Like G.I. Joe, Transformers got just yanked off the air, man. Whatever happened that year legislatively, like all of that was gone, and it got replaced with like Snorks and just.
I grew up watching.
We had He-Man, Thundercats.
Yeah, we had all that, dude.
Quest.
Silverhawks, the whole nine. But it was just gone after like something happened.
A lot of it was Japanese programs, Voltron and Transformers, for example. But then, yeah. The toy companies marketing two young boys who put out He-Man, for example, which was a huge success. I mean, they made over like $430 million, and it dropped down to just like $8 million.
I hear it's coming. I saw that. I hear it's coming back though. I hear they're bringing some He-Man back.
Well, if they could redo the movie, it would be good because that was bad.
With Dolph Lundgren, that was painful. That was totally painful. But we watched it though, right? As kids, we're like, "Fuck, this is awesome." Only through historical perspective can we be like, this is terrible.
No, even then I was like, it was a He-Man movie, but it was about Courtney Cox breaking up with her boyfriend or something.
Pretty
it
much
was bad.
It was like that early Captain America movie.
My friend was in a Dolph film. He got blown up. He got shot by a shotgun from Dolph, and nice. I said, you got to say, it was like just 3 days of shooting that he was in, and he actually kept him in for a couple of scenes, whatever, but I asked him to tell him, like, you gotta tell him how great He-Man was when you see him. Like, that's the first thing. And he's like, and he did. He goes, I'm going to enjoy shooting you.
He never did bounce back from that, did he?
No, he's supposed to be dead after the shotgun. Oh, you mean He-Man? Yeah.
No,
whatever. Dolph did well with Rocky and other things.
He did. I didn't know he would like knew 10 languages. Like, I mean, probably was,
Oh, he's like an MIT. Hey, he's a Kaczynski in the Waiting, maybe. I don't know.
Well, the guy who played Boss Hogg, I forget his name, the Dukes of Hazzard. He same thing, spoke like all these languages, and he worked for the CIA.
Mm-hmm. Jefferson Davis Hogg.
But look at that. Look at this guy. Q, Roscoe Pico train. We move on, ladies and gentlemen.
It reminded me of Bush and Cheney a little bit. You had the little fat dude in the white
totally did.
And Roscoe, he's like, did you get Roscoe Pico train?
Come on, Flash.
yeah, exactly. You know the dog's name.
Hell yeah, dude. Flash was a pimp. Hey, so we're moving on, man. Tomorrow,
Daisy Duke started Daisy Dukes.
She did,
and then they changed the General League because the SJWs are
of course.
Better flag slavery.
I forget his name. Roscoe. He was a senator or congressman from Iowa. Pat. I forget his name.
Cooter became a congressman for Virginia.
Was it Virginia? Okay, my bad. Yeah, he won.
It was Cooter, the mechanic.
No, I'm sorry,
show.
Cooter. That's a different guy. Yeah, Roscoe, I think, was in Iowa. He just died recently. Roscoe, I forget. This summer, maybe. But the conversation, I digress, ladies and gentlemen.
All over the place.
9/11 is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. It is actually 9/11 where you are at in Tokyo, Japan today, right now. It will be 9/11 tomorrow for us. Gosh,
Will there be another YouTube motivated attack in the world?
No,
will there be another video that inspires people to do a Benghazi? Hillary actually said that. Do you remember that? They're like, they were motivated by this YouTube video.
They did it standing in front of the caskets of the dead to the families.
We just had on before this episode Chris Tanto Peranto, dude, who was one of the badass who survived that whole thing, and it's a harrowing story, dude. I just can't even begin to imagine his frustration or the frustration of any of those guys. Like, what? Turn down order for help? Like, what? What are you talking about? Like,
we can't on the way.
We can't go. It's like insane. And I was like, hey, how abnormal was that for that to happen? He's like, very. I just don't.
Maybe they thought it was an Egyptian ship.
Yeah. So it's here, man. It's here. We're 18, 19 years in deep. I don't know. We're almost like Lee 55 years later. We still think Lee Harvey Oswald did it. That day we had multiple attacks: 1 building, 2 building, Pentagon, Shanksville, 2 buildings collapsed, 1 building. I mean, we were all so psychologically traumatized, and that was almost the point to open this checkbook, this war on terror, this never-ending war. Here we are, 18 years later, still in Iraq, still in Afghanistan, expanding it to Iran, possibly, and these other places, arming places in Syria, etc. Based off this arming Al Qaeda. Whether it's the people who actually fucking supposedly did it, Saudi Arabia giving them $200 billion of weapons, which is just insane in itself. How far have we come, dude? Are we getting any hipper to what's going on? Because this never-ending war is continuing, whether Bolton's there or not. Wesley Clark said it ages ago. Iran's on the list. Lebanon's on the list. We're seeing developments there with Hezbollah. What's going on, dude? Are we going to be seeing more and more
list, of this? By the way,
I don't doubt it.
The problem is almost the entirety. This is the same thing with Kennedy and 9/11. They're obsessed with the physics, right? With Kennedy, all they talk about is the magic bullet and how many shots you can get from this distance and da-da-da-da.
Yep.
And not looking at the politics of it. And with 9/11, the loudest voices are the ones that talk about Building 7 and how fat it looks like by eyeballing it that there's demolition or something, and not looking at the politics of it at all.
Right.
And shit, our own FBI has Saudi royals funding at least 3 of the hijackers, probably more.
Well, I mean, why didn't we just find it so absolutely insane that the skies were empty except for the Bin Laden family 2 or 3 days after it happened? Like, what the fuck, dude? How was
well, there was another attempted hijacking on the 13th too.
And I never heard that.
All 10 of them got arrested. 9 of them were released. The only one they kept was the pilot. And what was weird is he was a pilot posing as a different pilot. So he actually could fly, but his ID and stuff was fake and based on a different pilot. But and that's all in my film. We've explained all that. That section of it, there's a guy named Nelson Martin. He made a film called 6 on 77 that talks about that a little bit too.
So a building 7,
6 hijackers on flight 77 rather than 5 like we thought.
A building 7 blatantly collapsing like the Sands in Las Vegas, like we all kind of know, that isn't kind of just a blatant red pill, almost like an Epstein dying. You have my mom called me and like, Jeff, what the hell's going on? Like, she's not a conspiracy theorist, but it was one of those like everyone knew something was up when that happened. When you see a building 7 collapse, isn't it like a WTF moment? Like, all right, dude, sucked. What? And then you find out what all was housed there.
Unless you caught it live, you probably didn't see Building 7 collapse until around 2006 when YouTube comes about, because it just was on TV and then done, right? And so they announced that it had collapsed at 10:45 in the morning. Everyone says, oh, yeah, on the BBC they announced it like just 20 seconds before it fell or whatever, but way before that on several different channels. And I've what do you call my stupid Japanese coming through my face? Cataloged it in my, in War by Deception. So you can see the reports. I think it's Fox and CBS and CNN. And they were saying it, and the fire department is saying a 50-story building fell in 47. But there's so much smoke around ground zero you can't see. But maybe it was supposed to fall then. but it hadn't. But it was allowed to burn uncontrollably for 7 hours. So the fact that it would fall eventually with uncontrolled fires for 7 hours really isn't that big a mystery. What's weird is them announcing that it had fallen hours before it did, and then announcing, minutes before it did again. That's where it gets a little screwy.
So do you not feel there were pre-planned explosives in there?
To be like, well, what I feel is it's not the best star. We have way stronger evidence than people arguing about whether or not it was demolished or burned just based on looking at how it fell. Like we caught explosive devices in the parking garage in vans in the World Trade Centers on 9/11 reported live. Right. So that's like, just why are you talking about this over here when you've got known vans with bombs in them?
For sure.
And then we know where this front company goes back to because they got arrested. They had foreknowledge in 9/11. Miami FBI field office is telling Newark, oh, did you know that one of the 9/11 hijackers actually used this moving company to go from Florida to New Jersey?
Right.
Omari, right? All the story of the dancing Israelis, etc. Like that, they have to distract from that. So what happens is you get an obsession with physics. The dumbest thing was the Pentagon stuff because it's part of the first no planer of all 4 planes. Eventually, they'd say were holograms or whatever.
Right.
The first no planer thing was the Pentagon, and it's real simple disinformation. If there's no plane, there's no hijackers, no hijacker, no paper trail back to foreign state support. But if you have a plane, then you have hijackers, and then you see the Saudi role, you see the Israeli role. But if you can say the hijackers are still alive, or like basically anything that ever came out of Jones's mouth.
No, for sure. Loose change, dude. Loose change that did a lot of that.
Exactly. That was disseminated everywhere. It was all over MySpace. I got a physical DVD in the mail, right? And there's nothing in that movie, nothing that's correct. It's all disinfo from start to finish. The only thing I got right was the date that happened on 9/11.
I just saw, I think it was Burr, Jason Burr was promoting again. I think it was a second edition or whatever. But no, I mean, I totally
the basements and all this nonsense. I'm like, there's what basements?
No, I mean, I agree, dude. I mean, that's been since time immemorial. What you just said, like, God, I mean, ever since I was a kid and JFK was my thing, it was always about how many shooters. Well, no, James Tagg got hit with a missed shot. I mean, it was all about that day and who shot from where, the Daltech spilling, blah blah blah.
Like, which is how many shots could Oswald get off?
I mean, which from a forensic ballistic standpoint, if you're a nerd like that, that's cool. But I'm a history guy, so it's like. That's when we start getting to this kind of circumstantial evidence.
There's way better evidence. I mean, like,
right.
As far as the physics go, Kennedy's brain went out the back of his head. He got shot from front. Period.
Right.
That's that. You don't need to spend so much time on the physics and stuff. Like, RFK was prosecuting the mob. The mob was blackmailing Hoover. Look at what Johnson changed and what he didn't change. Right. It had nothing to do with the Federal Reserve, by the way. That's another pet peeve.
That was one I jumped
Executive Order 1111-0 had nothing to do with it because that passed. Johnson didn't reverse it. Stayed on the books until the 80s. Yeah. All it did was limit who could issue silver certificates. It actually was pro-Fed. No one even bothered to just read it. Just go and look up the order and read it. It doesn't do what you think it did. Kennedy was pro-Fed. They were old money. Like, he gets unfairly romanticized by one side and demonized by the other. But Kennedy had really pissed off certain factions that needed him to die, and all the people around him. And you have to include his brother's death into it too. Like, and rather than having a separate theory for everything, my take on Kennedy, and once I explain it, people are like, "Oh, dang, that's what happened." I mean, it makes perfect sense. It just takes a long time to say all of it.
Well,
you kind of have to be initiated in the mob and like know about what was going on already before you can start explaining it.
Yeah,
and a guy that's really good on that is Doug Valentine. He's very good on the golden age of the mob, Lansky and Hank Greenspun, the rest of it. Ermep has got a lot of good documents on Greenspun. He was a weapons runner, but he also used his profits to set up Mo Dalitz in the Flamingo Hotel, who took over Bugsy Siegel's operations, and eventually sold it to the Fertittas, by the way, from UFC.
Yep.
Wow.
I didn't say their name.
Well, they didn't do it. They just bought it from mobsters, right?
Well, and it was weird because, like I said,
there was some intermarriage in the families, though.
I've chewed on so much of the JFK stuff, and you hit me up to a lot of this stuff, kind of the Israeli role with Kennedy went to inspect the nuclear sites over there, as well as, you always heard about the mafia, and I never really looked at the Russian / kind of Jewish mafia and that role, and then I started researching more deep into Meyer Lansky, and granted, the Italian mafia was powerful as well, but the Jewish mafia was just crazy.
Yeah, those were the top two, and they overlap here and there.
Yeah.
But it's Jacob Rubinstein that shoots Oswald.
Right.
Carlos Marcello is Italian, I guess, but he and Traficante were moving drugs and guns back and forth to Israel and to Cuba.
We're jumping ahead because we need to have you for this is September 11th. We're talking.
Yeah, let's cycle back. The point is focusing on the physics.
Exactly. So
all
Ryan,
it can at maximum do is tell you what didn't happen.
Exactly.
It still doesn't tell you what did happen.
Precisely, and getting more into that, the politics of 9/11. Obviously,
right.
we have some time here, so. If you can break down how it wasn't 19 Saudi hijackers with box cutters.
Right. Well, only 15 of those 19 were Saudi or had Saudi passports from Jeddah.
Okay.
Springfield, they were on the fast track program, so just because they had a passport from there doesn't even really mean that's where they're from.
Who greenlit those passports being acquired? Wasn't that
the fast track program was set up by our own CIA?
There you go.
Yeah.
I thought it was John Brennan. I thought there was a name attached to it, but maybe not.
Well, who set up the whole program was the CIA, though.
Okay.
They let them in. They let in the blind sheikh before the World Trade Center bombing of 1993. He was in an Egyptian prison. How the hell did he get into
One of those
New York?
guys had a recording of how the FBI was setting him up. Like the FBI gave him the explosives for that first run. You familiar with that?
Yeah, some of them said he was their informant and was telling his handlers, look, this is the target. Here's our warehouse. They're making the bomb. And they pulled him off the case. They said it's because he wanted more money. But give him the money. See, they were obsessed. They were like, yeah, we're not worried about them. We want you to wear a wire and get the blind sheikh to incriminate himself so that we can get the blind sheikh. And he did that, but they still never swooped down. And because he was pulled off the case as the bomb maker, they lost their informant, and then Ramzi Youssef was sent to replace him. And he's the real mastermind of 9/11, because Ramzi Youssef's the one that formulated the Millennial Plot and Bojinka Plot and using airplanes as weapons. And he did successfully pull off the 93 bombing and wasn't caught for another year. So he's in prison with Kaczynski right now.
Same spot in Colorado?
Yet he hasn't been suicided like Epstein.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, he's in Colorado.
So the major politics behind it, my friend. You're looking at now 18, 20 years of defense contracts, private contractors, trillions of dollars, redrawing the map, balkanization of certain regions throughout the world, Middle East, Africa, we're moving into South America, et cetera, et cetera. What was it all about, man? What key bono? Who benefited, and what was it really all about in your opinion?
A lot of industries profited from this new war on terror to replace the Cold War. The Cold War used to be I won't call it a budgetary excuse, because there really was a Cold War, like there really was a Soviet Union and all, but it was good for business.
Right.
It's not like that. I'm not saying they manufactured it or anything. It was real, but that was the gift that kept on giving. And they would over-exaggerate threats, and sometimes they invented them. Like, I have a film called Decades of Deception that shows a lot of shenanigans that happened in Central America, where the Americans the CIA brought in our own guns, pointed to them, and said, look, the Soviets, and then went in, right?
Right.
And so a lot of things were overblown, but the Cold War was an excuse, and it really wasn't a Cold War. Millions of people died. Millions of Vietnamese were killed. People died in the Bay of Pigs. There was a lot of fighting, Afghanistan especially, that a lot of people died in the quote-unquote Cold War.
Right.
But it was mostly, mostly foreigners. But we did lose tens of thousands in Vietnam, supposedly fighting war on communism, but it was really for Bell helicopter and heroin. I call it the war of heroin and helicopters. But that, with the Soviet Union falling, and throughout the 90s, Clinton actually closing bases down, and they were looking for something, and they tried domestic terrorism first. They had OKC and going after white supremacist groups and stuff, but that just wasn't everyone knows that isn't real enough. You know, it wasn't there. The Oklahoma City bombing was the largest terrorist attack on American soil after Waco until September 11th.
Right.
But with September 11th, you had all these neocons in the Bush administration who had been pushing. They tried to blackmail Clinton into a war in Iraq too. That's how he got Lewinsky'd, and he did bomb them while he was being convicted. And when the Senate didn't confirm his impeachment, then he called off the attack. So,
I remember that.
He went into Bosnia and did plenty of bad things. Both
yeah,
the
there's plenty of scuttlebutt that
go as far as Bush.
That Lewinsky was a possible intelligence plant.
She's a honey trap, 100%. Who saves a dress with semen on it? Come on. I mean, that's a honey trap.
Linda Tripp, dude, the hottest chick on the planet.
Kenneth Starr, who was also a lawyer for Epstein. I mean, it's in that whole clique. He's on this map.
Oh, dude, we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get to it.
But the purpose of 9/11 for the U.S. incentive was replacing the Cold War with the war on terror, a war that can never end because it's a war on a tactic. You know,
I remember reading what was it? The Brzezinski book, The Grand Chessboard. I think it's like the first couple paragraphs. It's like the U.S. must always have a stronghold in Eurasia, whatever it takes.
Goldstein, yeah.
And I mean, he's the father of exactly. And he's the father of, funding the first Mujahideen against the Soviets, which was obviously in our beneficial interest, but that kept going on throughout decades. And that's essentially kind of what we're seeing now, bro. The byproduct, as we know, of 9/11 is us funding all these proxy armies. And, I think
the U.S. set up so the U.S. and Israel have already been joined at the hip since assassinating Kennedy. And in 1976, they brought the Saudis into the fray because in response to the Yom Kippur War of 73, there was the OPEC oil weapon. And so there were gas lines in the 70s, and they realized we can't beat you militarily, we can't beat you economically, but we have this one vital resource, and if all of us jack up the price, you can't afford it. So they needed to break up OPEC. In the Middle East, the country with the most oil reserves is Saudi Arabia. So if we can get Saudi Arabia, OPEC is done, because you can't have a cartel once there's a rate breaker, right? So they pulled the Saudis into their wing to join with the Israelis into this nexus called the Safari Club. And the French and the Moroccans and others were members, and so was Iran, but only for a couple of years, because after the revolution in 79, they're out of the clique, of course. But people don't understand that these Wahhabi and Zionists, these religious fanatics, they're useful cannon fodder, right? It's useful rhetoric to generate wars with their neighbors. And people think Saudi Arabia and Israel are at odds. Not at all. I mean, they're both funding ISIS right now, and they both supported Al-Qaeda. But one of the other thing that makes Saudi Arabia a soft target is it's a monarchy. So you only need to bribe a few people and you've got control of the whole country, right? And they also need to have this militant Islamic form of Islam, because the justification to have a monarchy is from their religion. So they need to have that, and it needs to be the Sunni version and not Shiite version. Otherwise, a different family will get it. So that's the real political tension behind the supposed theological debate. It's not a theological debate any more than Protestants and Catholics. I mean, it's almost the same faith. It's just a little bit lineage of Muhammad or whatever. That's not it. It's about tribal nepotism. If this group's in power, this group gets all the jobs. If the other group's in power, that one gets all the jobs. That's what the real tension is. But Saudi Arabia, with the royals, was able to set up a foreign bank called BCCI, which was used to launder money to terrorists. They needed a way to, off the books, push money and wash money and get it to what's now Al-Qaeda, and in Afghanistan, for example, and a lot of groups throughout Eastern Europe, etc. And the source of the money, of course, was the narcotics trade. That was a big chunk of it. Heroin from Vietnam, for example. And then once they have the narcotics trade, that's an off-the-books budget. But then you can't just give somebody billions of dollars unexplained, like how they get all this money and guns, right? So that you have to say, oh, they're selling the narcotics, right? They're the ones running the opium trade in Afghanistan and make all this money and end up with helicopters and stuff like that, So that's BCCI was able to funnel money and wash it. And the Saudis set up this bank in Pakistan physically, but it's a Saudi creation. And that was their role in in the Safari Club. The Israelis had most of the translators and intelligence on the entire Arab world was from them. Our offices really don't have that many translators that can't speak Farsi, can't speak Turkish, can't speak Azerbaijani, that we don't really have a lot of linguists. The Israelis do, and the U.S. relied heavily on them for intelligence in that region of the world. And of course, they always lie to us. And there's also a lot of just religious ideological overlap between Christian Zionists and Jews. So they just are on Team Israel because that's what they're familiar with, you know. And also the people they need to steal stuff from are on the other side. So you go against the side that has the resources you want. Israel doesn't really have much in the way of raw resources or anything.
Well, as we're going to talk about with the Epstein stuff, they did get a certain company of that faith or of that ilk did get drilling rights in the Golan Heights, but as you
Glenn Dubin, and there's several connections to Genie Energy and Golan Heights.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
That is nothing compared to the amount of money that's under the sand that they stole from Iraq, that they stole from, they finessed from Saudi Arabia, etc. But
well, and again,
this group was already in place before 9/11. I want to stress to people that the Israelis and the Saudis, Israel and the U.S. work together in Iran-Contra too, but these international cliques, it's not just the CIA or something. It's
right.
GID, the Mossad, and CIA have been working for decades already, financing and creating Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And then after 9/11, you see these same factions running guns and money and supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. Right. So if they're supporting Al-Qaeda and creating Al-Qaeda before 9/11, they're supporting Al-Qaeda after 9/11. But you want to think during 9/11 that none of these groups, they were just completely independent and did that all by themselves, and none of these intelligence agencies had anything to do with it. That's so naive.
Right.
And we have evidence of it. The problem is, I think it was they had a green light. It's not like they did this behind America's back. We all did it. Robert Mueller covered up for the Saudis. The excuse is, oh, well, Bandar Bush is so close to the Bushes, it would be embarrassing for the president or something. Well, no, you end that relationship and go after. I mean, it wasn't that. It's because the whole thing would come down. And the Israelis really have Saudi by the short hairs right now, because if Saudi Arabia doesn't, do what we say to up oil production or lower, if they don't act as a proxy against Iran, if they don't behave, at any moment, Israel, which definitely runs our press, can say, bam, Saudi Arabia, Bandar Bush, and Princeton bin Turk Fasil, through their wives, sent money to Omar Bayoumi and Hassan Basnan, who financed hijackers in California and Louisiana, Khalid al-Mildhar and al-Hazmi. And they were pilots. They were on Flight 77, not pilots. They were on Flight 77 that hit the Pentagon. And it's important to admit that hit the Pentagon, because if you don't have that plane, then you don't have them. And if you don't have them, right, you don't have a Saudi connection. But they have that blackmail over Saudi Arabia forever. They're not going to report on their own role in 9/11. And Saudi Arabia can't report on it because Saudi Arabia doesn't run the press. Right. But Israel has a huge influence over our media. I mean, there's a 45-year conflict in Palestine, and we still call Jewish colonies neighborhoods. Right. Like they top to bottom run the show on the propaganda in the Middle East.
Well, and the underreporting of all the things you're talking about, snipers hitting kids in the genitals, and I mean, it's...
They shoot kids in the balls, and they sit out in lawn chairs and watch as Gaza gets bombed. It's horrific. But the thing is, Saudi Arabia has a very bad public image in the United States, whereas Israel's got a pretty good image for the plebs, at least. So if it came out in the media that Saudi Arabia had a role in 9/11, oh, they're toast, literally toast.
Israel,
so they will be. I mean, if Israel decided that Saudi Arabia is getting out of line, all they got to do is simultaneously have their talking heads explain any of the known points that are already admitted in the JAS report and others that Saudi Arabia royals financed 9/11 hijackers.
Oh, okay.
Bam. That's all they got to do. And it was interesting. Like, do you remember the 28 pages, the infamous 28 pages? I had already, in my film, year and a half before this got unredacted, written out everything that was in the 28 pages. And the way I was able to do that is because I went to the same field office primary sources and read exactly where they read it from, which, it took a few FOIAs and all, and it was a little bit of a pain, but we already had that information. And a few people were talking about it, but, what's interesting is if this is legit, and it is, and it's all FBI field office reports from mainly the West Coast. I mean, or like from Phoenix and Denver and stuff, and like all west of the Mississippi at least. And this is where you're getting your intel on the Saudi role in 9/11, hijackers, and giving them logistical support, and buying an apartment, living with them for a month. We had a Saudi informant live with them for a month. The other guy lived across the street from them. One of them got a job even. Like, they've been handled, given, because they couldn't speak English. They had people there helping them, holding their hand the whole way, putting them on the plane to go east and all that. And yet, wouldn't you then want to read the field office reports from the east too? Wouldn't you want to know what Miami said, what Newark said, what New York City say, right? And almost nobody bothered to look at it. But if you do look at it, it goes all into the Israeli role and Saudi role.
Well, that was almost the necessitation for supposedly these 15 new intelligence agencies, because, excuse me, the FBI doesn't talk to the CIA doesn't talk to the FBI, so we need to create all these new intelligence agencies so communication could be, augmented. It's just, It's insane.
Well, they wanted the DHS as the hub because they always blame incompetence, but their excuse, because these hijackers that Saudi Arabia was financing were known already as Al-Qaeda members. They had been witnessed meeting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in Malaysia at an Al-Qaeda summit meeting, and
doing Al-Qaeda
CIA,
shit.
Al-Qaeda had a meeting. Isn't that hilarious? But all the Al-Qaeda heads are there, and these guys who are going to flight schools, who are meeting with and stayed the night with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, are then living in the United States with their real names, with a Saudi informant who bought them a house. Like, it's insane, the levels of logistical and financial support that they got from Saudi Arabia. But our own CIA did not inform the FBI that these two had entered the country and were living in California. They didn't tell them until August of 2001. And by then, they weren't in California anymore. They had moved over to the east and were getting ready to do 9/11. So there's no excuse for that. Why didn't the CIA tell the FBI what was going on? Well, obviously, they're supposed to reach their target. We are shielding them from local law enforcement, because it's not like everyone's in on this,
Exactly.
All you need is the top bottleneck. So police who were monitoring people, and the FBI who were trying to follow Al-Qaeda suspects in the east, every time they try to get into their telecommunications processes, they'd change them. It's like they kept staying 2 steps ahead of them. And we found out later that Converse and InfoSeek, 2 Israeli software programs, 50% owned by the Israeli government, had a backdoor channel to all communications. So, and they actually were moving the hijackers around, physically moved them around with, they had 6 different moving companies. One of them was called Urban Moving Systems.
Heard of that one, yeah.
Another was, then there was White Glove, and the one that got caught moving was something international. I'm getting a brain fart. I've explained this so many times.
All this blends together.
International Movers. It's called Classic International Movers. That one moved a 9/11 hijacker from Florida up to New Jersey. And there seems to be more, but it's all redacted. But when you have pages of whited out information, it means something bad they don't want you to know, right? But you can infer. I Rosetta Stoned a lot of it because they did 6 reports, and they didn't redact the exact same things in each report. So you can kind of piece together, this one has this sentence, that one has that sentence, and you can get the most of the story, and you can get the names because the names were in the police report. And then the FBI doesn't have the names, but it has their dates of birth, and we combining the two. It was a lot of legwork, but I put it all together and I put it all in a movie. But it explains this Israeli role. And these front companies, Dominic Suter, who ran Urban Moving Systems in New Jersey, fled to Israel. He left furniture stranded, just sitting in the warehouse, like mid-move, closed the business and ran away because 5 of his employees were busted in a van that had traces of explosives, who had earlier in the day been witnessed celebrating the 9/11 attacks. There are pictures of them now that were released last May. They whited out the faces, but I took their mug shots and put them on top of the white squares so you could kind of see what it probably looked like. They were celebrating the attacks, and then if you dig through the FBI files, you find out the driver of the van, Sivan Kursberg, he had actually been to Doric Towers where they were seen celebrating, standing up on top of the van and flicking lighters on September 10th, the day before 9/11. They were there at 8 in the morning. The attacks don't happen until 45 minutes later. So they were just sitting there smoking cigarettes in a parking lot, looking at the World Trade Centers, waiting for this to happen. Then they're taking pictures, they're filming it, they're celebrating, they're getting their van and drive away.
So what was Trump talking about when he said something about the dancing Arabs? Was he just
dancing Middle Easterners?
Yeah, whatever it was.
Well, they were from the Middle East. They're from Israel.
Oh,
they weren't Arab.
Okay, my bad.
He then conflated that because Dan Rathers went on with David Letterman, I believe it was. He went on one of those late shows.
Yeah.
And was talking about the people across the Hudson River celebrating. But he didn't know they were Israeli. And once it came out that they were, you never heard about that story again.
That's for sure.
Not on TV.
Right.
But they were celebrating because they knew. And this is not the Mossad. These are not the people that the A-team. These guys are in their 20s. These aren't crack seasoned Mossad agents. Right. This is like the C-team at best.
Yeah.
Right? They're just people that had foreknowledge and didn't have enough discipline to just
lock it down.
Shut up. And,
right.
Yeah. So they had to go there and film it and get their trophy videos. And I have an inner spat on my Discord that I want those kids to sort out on their own. But they keep
It is 9/11 season. I'm sure you're in demand.
When it comes to these front companies, were these front companies then dissolved right after all of them, or do they still exist? I mean, because obviously we know the CIA has a lot of different types of companies for different operations and fronts.
What was interesting is White Glove Movers, there are two companies with the same name. And so it seems like what they did is I think one's White Glove and one's White Gloves or something, like a letter different or whatever. And I don't want anybody to like go and harass them. They had nothing to do with it. But they took names that were pretty close to companies that actually already existed. But Dominic Suter took out a $500,000 loan just in 2001. Nothing prior and obviously nothing after, because at 12 in the afternoon on 9/11, he shut his doors and ran away.
Right.
And he and his wife fled back to Israel. They got on the first plane available and were out of there. The employees that were caught, they had a huge party on September 10th. And I have the flyers for the DJ that they used. So I contact the DJ that played the music in Brooklyn, where the brothers were, Paul and Sivan Kursberg. And Yoran Shmuel was there. Omir Mamari was there. And Oded Eldner was there. This Karen something another was there. Just have her first name. But all these people from these different moving companies were having this huge party in Brooklyn, as you do on a random Monday in September on a minimum wage furniture moving job.
Right.
But they're celebrating again after the planes hit. They're filming it. And then they got up on the roof of Urban Moving System because both towers had been hit already, and they're filming them collapse, right? And a weird thing that's in the report is somebody says to Mamari, because it's in his interrogation, so I know who's being talked to, but I don't know which one of them. I think it's Yoran Shmuel, just based on the amount of letters in the white space. But whatever. It could also be Dominic Suter. He doesn't have a C in his name, by the way. Somebody had told him, come up to the roof. They're about to take down the second building. And it's like, he thought they meant the authorities, like the Americans took it down on purpose so it didn't go like that and crush a bunch of buildings, whatever. Because this guy really wasn't part of the clique. He'd only been there a couple weeks. He only joined the box. He was in the secondary business of like building boxes and stuff. He wasn't even a mover. But he was there because he'd Sivan Kursberg and he had served in the army together, and he just noticed him one day and it's like, oh yeah, I can get you a job doing this. So he shut his mouth or kept out of the loop, because they would have private meetings. The Hungarians and Russians, the guys that actually did the lifting and the work for the moves, would say that the Israelis would have these private meetings in Hebrew, where they were not privy to. And I doubt they're talking about, strategies for moving couches or something. But they were in there. There were 17 computer hard drives for this little moving operation, right? which have been confiscated, but we don't know what's on them. I'd love to know. That's something that we ought to have attention on and FOIA requests for, find out what's on these hard drives, but nope. And a guy that really stuck it to him on this was Justin Raimondo from antiwar.com. He wrote a book called The Terror Enigma, Israel and 9/11 Connection. He passed away in June this year. But that guy was on top of this from the beginning. But he got so inundated with the kook movement, like attacking him, that he just was like, and gave up. He just stopped talking about it, right? But he'd followed all the primary sources on the early day of the Jewish Daily Forward, the Virgin Record from New Jersey, reports on Army radio, everything that was going on in the day. If you pieced it all together, you started getting this more clear picture about these guys. Now, these guys, they're just sort of like the avenue to a bunch of other characters and more, and all the other fronts. But they're the morons that sat there and celebrated and got caught and thrown in prison for 71 days, right? And I have their interrogations, even though they're heavily redacted. There's a lot you can deduce. There's a part in there where they refer to the brothers. So I know Sivan and Paul are brothers. So I'm like, that one's Sivan and that one's Paul. So if that one's Mamari, these two can only be, like that kind of deduction stuff. There was also a part where they forgot to redact a footnote about the Jewish Agency when Paul Kurtzberg, the one that failed all his polygraph tests, even though he refused to take one for a month. They all failed, by the way. He's saying that they were sent there by the Jewish Agency. Well, the Jewish Agency, which was the precursor to the Israeli government in the war in 48. Now they deal with moving around diaspora and stuff like that. But it's well known. Everybody knows. There's plenty of books about it that they're a Mossad-like operation. What they do is specialize on spying on Arab terrorists and infiltrating groups and blaming things on others and false flags. That is their
by way of deception. By way of deception.
Get this, the wealthiest man in Israel, Ertime Wertheimer, is on the board of governors for the Jewish Agency. This is the man that had the police commissioner of New York fly to Israel on August 26th to the 29th and gave him $250,000 in a loan that had no contract or anything of when you have to pay this back or what it's for or anything.
Interest rate,
and he
nothing.
didn't do it directly. He did it through a middleman named Bod Witkoff, who moves marble around in New York, which is deeply tied to the Gambino family and which Carrick then later went to prison for 10 years for his role in fraud and also taking bribes from the mafia to give them specific contracts and building and so on. You can look it up. Bernard Carrick, the guy that found a 9/11 passport on September 11th. He's the police commissioner. He's been taking $250,000 through an intermediary from the wealthiest man in Israel on the board of governors of the Jewish Agency, who sent the people there for a moving company caught celebrating the attacks and also traces of explosives in their van. Now, other vans are also found that day in Pennsylvania and in New York, and it's this long web. I made a 5-hour documentary about it, but very interesting one is the Aero Trucks outfit, which is what they use to make their moving vans. You just put your logo on a generic truck, right? Was in Tennessee. And a lot of these guys got driver's license in Tennessee because you don't need at that time you didn't need a social security number to get a license in Tennessee. And that's to make it easier because there's a lot of trucking in Tennessee, FedEx, et cetera. They all move through there. And so that's why they did that. They're not thinking 9/11 is going to happen. But there was a serendipitous case where, and it's tragic because people died, but the DMV did a sting, the FBI was watching them and did a sting on a group that was getting a lot of IDs for people that shouldn't have them. And they focused on this DMV employee named Catherine Smith, who was getting these licenses for people who were doing whatever with them in these Aero trucks. And the sting hits 6 guys in the parking lot of the DMV. The ringleader was named Khalid Abdallah, who had bought a car for Catherine. That's where she got her car. And 5 other guys, all from you can guess where. And one of them, this guy named Sakira Hamad, who had a cousin also with last name Hamad, who was in the World Trade Center. He had a card for this Denko Mechanical Magic Heating and Plumbing Company, which didn't exist, by the way, that allow and a pass to do work in the basement levels of the World Trade Center dated September 5th.
Wow.
And they asked them, "What were you guys doing there?" They said they're working on the sprinkler systems, the fire prevention systems that failed, by the way. So they were breaking the fire prevention systems. And you can bet there was a team in the other tower. They just didn't get caught. Because if they're in, I think this was the South Tower, they were in the North Tower. And so the fire prevention systems, if that doesn't come on and you hit 90 some floors up in the air, you're almost guaranteed that at least part of the building is going to collapse. Like if you can't get hoses on it and you don't have any water coming down as it should be, you're maximizing damage. You're maximizing your ability to do damage. And so,
but is it hot enough to melt steel, Ryan?
You don't have to melt steel. You just have to weaken it enough to drop its load. So.
For it not to be able to bear the weight above it.
What happened, it wasn't the steel beams melting or breaking, it was the joints that connect them that gave way. And it is hot enough to do that. I'm not going to argue about physics.
No, I was, I was half fucking around.
Yeah, I know. But
there needs to be a band. There's a band.
There's molten metal, not molten steel.
There needs to be a band combining the JFK and the 9/11 called the.
It does because
no,
it's like,
no. Hold on. The band.
I'm
The band is called.
People working in the towers, right? I'm giving you names, and this physics, right? So I'm like, I'm not even.
I feel you. I'm not even going there with you. But the band is called Single Pancake Theory. That's the name of the band combined.
They don't pancake like this. It's what people do is they're watching. This is the last thing on physics, I swear, but they're looking at the exterior of the building going like that, right? But they don't understand that behind those walls, inside, that's already collapsed. It's a tube structure. Most of that on the upper floors, it doesn't have the beams all the way up to the 90th floor. It only went up to like 32 levels and then switched so the concrete could be pulverized. And I mean, there's steel in the concrete, but it gets smaller it tapers as you go up. But it's called a tube structure. It was all the bang in the 60s. What you're seeing go down has already been gutted for a lot. And you've got a third of the building dropping. The impact that would make just falling one floor with no fires at all or whatever is about 10% of the Hiroshima bomb. Like it was gonna plow right through that. It's not a mystery. If you want to talk to real engineers and stuff, not AE 9/11. AE 9/11 is the same group that said, oh, an airplane would have to smash through 6 reinforced walls at the Pentagon with steel and concrete. Not true. The Pentagon is shaped like a crown that a king would wear. It's got rings on the top, and it's just one straight tube on the bottom. Plane went in, one wall, and the landing gear punched a hole in the C-ring. That's it. The rest is just sheetrock and stuff. There aren't 6 rings. That's all bull. If you don't know what the architecture of a building is, then you don't get to have an architectural opinion or an engineering opinion. Right. You know what the building like, right. This is the same charlatans running around. They have this new study from Alaska.
I was just about to ask you, Leroy Halsey.
The same one they did in 2017, and they didn't fix any of the problems they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, you sent me that.
It's I don't even want to. I get real triggered on that. Like I want to focus on who did it.
No, that's ultimately the larger question, bro.
These guys in Tennessee, by the way, thrown in prison except for the ringleader. Guess where he goes? Israel, just like Dominic Suter. They let him leave, but his fall guys, they're in prison. They're not in prison for 9/11. They're in prison for false IDs and so on. But they want to question them about the role of 9/11. Like, hey, what's going on there? Why were you guys doing work in the basement on the sprinkler systems when the Port Authority didn't hire you? And the PA is the one in charge of that. Now, the PA at that time, they're the ones that sold the properties to Larry Silverstein just before 9/11, right? And Kushner, Charles Kushner, is the one that's trying to finesse himself to become the chairman of the PA later, but and bought up property.
I was going to ask you about that in a little bit. Yeah,
bought up 50 million square feet just in case something happened. All these people would have somewhere to go. Like that's the other thing. Following the financial trail. Right. There's so much meat there, and people don't bother.
Well, you just helped me out with a perfect segue, bro. So that was like, you got to appreciate Ryan's analysis on that.
Catherine Smith was murdered the day before the trial, burned alive, so severely burned her arms had fallen off her body, and her car was burned. Everything was burned. So The key witness in that case was murdered while they're in prison, except for Odala, which means someone out of the prison had to kill her. An FBI agent named Susan Nash reported, and it was in USA Today and some other papers, that there's gasoline in her clothing. So that's arson, that's murder. She didn't dump. When people commit suicide, they take pills, they hang them. Very, very few people burn themselves to death, you know? Right. And women, especially, if it is a violent death, it's usually men that choose that. Women, the day before a trial, don't set themselves on fire in their car.
You get that one cat recently charged the White House and set himself on fire and charged the White House? It was scary shit.
Yeah.
But no, this is a perfect segue, my friend. I mean, the finances that are always all over this. You go back to your BCCI, and now we're seeing the new incarnation of the BCCI is essentially, and help me out, HSBC. We're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, my friend, and all we've heard in the news for years, quite frankly, is about Jeffrey Epstein and his proclivities and everything relating to his sexual proclivities. And I don't mean to make light of this, but we're going to find out that it goes well beyond that, ladies and gentlemen. They worked hard and they played hard. Jeffrey Epstein was a part of not just facilitating the trafficking of children. He was washing the money for drugs, arms, guns. I mean, and this goes back a very, very long way. And I'm going to put a link to what Ryan has done. It's essentially, he calls it, I guess, the Epstein maps. And it's essentially a flow chart, you know what I mean, of all these different associations. And it'll blow your fucking mind how it goes.
The maps are necessary because it's so many names and businesses. You need a physical.
So many that we've all heard of. You know, Seagrams, the Brothmans, the Wexners, Victoria's Secrets. It's insane.
The whole mega group, yep.
Mega, I'm going to ask you all about that. So, I mean, as we kind of wind down, and we're going to wind down with this subject, but I'm going to more kind of throw out names and kind of associations, and you kind of explain who this is. But, I mean, just overall, Jeffrey Epstein, this guy, in my opinion, was a part of a Mossad operation, a honeypot blackmail operation, blackmailing people to, like you said earlier, you know, whether it's politics or whatever it is, basically to get people
mostly trying to steal technology and scientific.
And that's that's what I want to get into, how tech companies are hugely related to this. This involves Nexium too, you guys. Smallville, the Allison Mack, who was just pinched with the whole Smallville because her family, the daughters of Charles Brothman were involved with.
Claire Brothman pleaded guilty. Yeah.
So off the top, Jeffrey Epstein is arrested once again, a while ago, in 2004, whatever it was, got the sweetheart deal from, I guess, the U.S. attorney at the time in Florida, who wound up becoming the labor secretary of Trump, Mr. Acosta, who was relieved of his duties recently. But Epstein's arrested, and we all were like, what the fuck? He's arrested. That's crazy. This gets into the whole, like, who's the white hat, Trump, etc.
Surprising thing.
That, to me, again, I was wondering.
That was the most shocking thing in the whole thing is, oh, you really rearrested him?
So who did that? Who is obviously, clearly it's not the deep state because they don't. Do you think he's dead? First of all, do you think he's actually dead?
Oh yeah, because he's useless alive. He can't do anything for him. He's got too much heat on him, and if he so much as started talking to other inmates or whatever, they're toast. And he was gonna plea bargain. That little sissy couldn't stay in jail. Like, he'd never really gone to jail before. He lived in a apartment adjacent to the jail, and 6 days a week he got on work release, right, where he's still meeting.
Well, and he even told people how he couldn't be arrested for this and that. I mean, he had some juice. The guy had definitely had some juice, and we're going to get into.
The last thing he said is "see you on Sunday."
Yeah.
Right. 12 hours a day he was meeting with attorneys. He was still having sex. He was having female lawyers come in on conjugal visits, and he would go and meet with them, and he was still, he's still laughing at it all, and he thought he could get it out on appeal. And he'd be able to have house arrest in his New York mansion and continue his life. And they needed him
to go away.
Because Ghislaine Maxwell can disappear and has. Jean-Luc Brunel can disappear and has. But there's certain people who can't disappear. Prince Andrew can't disappear.
So let's do a little cliff notes. When we throw out the names, we got to qualify it for anybody who might be just listening and getting their news about Epstein from this particular outlet or yours. Ghislaine Maxwell was the daughter of, what's his name, Robert Maxwell, who died suspiciously, who apparently had ties to foreign intelligence, Mossad, et cetera, et cetera.
He fell off a boat naked and drowned.
Yeah, fell off the Ghislaine or whatever.
Fell off his own yacht, yeah.
Which was named after his daughter. And then his daughter winds up kind of linking up with Jeffrey Epstein. But then it doesn't really stop there.
The daughter started a software company.
Yes, I was just going to say, you need to go to Ryan's Epstein map because essentially Christine Maxwell She headed up, what is it? I think it was a Chiliad software company. And I think in 2004, Chiliad Software Company, which Ghislaine Maxwell's sister Christine headed up, installed their particular type of software into the FBI counterterrorism database, the CIA, the NSA, and Ryan just mentioned a little earlier about backdoors and how they really fucking spy on people. So this goes.
You think they developed that on their own?
Exactly. That's why I say this goes so far beyond. As horrible. I mean, God, we can't even get it. It's hard to listen to some of the horrible shit they do to children, but it goes so far beyond that.
Financial backers are the mega group, which is the wealthiest Zionists in the world. Created Click. All the Bronfmans are in it. Leslie Wexner's in it. Steinhardt's in there. It's a who's list of prominent billionaire Zionists. And the sole purpose is to influence Canadian U.S. policy in the direction that Israel wants. And they set up, Leslie Wexner gave him a $77 million home. You don't just give people mansions in New York, right? And they set up the Wexner Foundation, which was a way that Epstein was chairman of, by the way. They got to push money into the coffers of Ehud Barat. So when you're saying why now, like who went after him, it's not the deep state, da-da-da-da. The reason that Epstein was thrown under the bus is because this week, Israel has an election, and Ehud Barat is running against Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And Epstein, there are pictures of Ehud Barat trying to disguise himself, visiting the New York rape mansion. And he was also on flight lists to the Caribbean, and his phone numbers and everything are also in Epstein's black book. So and Netanyahu's tweeting the pictures of Barat and saying Barak's watch is going to Epstein's, right? This is a way of smearing his competitor. Barak, on the other hand, is talking about the corruption scandal of both Netanyahu and his wife, right? So there's a huge smear campaign in Israel. Trump personally hates Epstein and has for a long time. Let me tell you a quick story of the history of these two. Because all the press has said is, they keep quoting that thing with Trump saying, oh, Epstein likes him on the younger side or whatever.
Right.
And I haven't been his friend for 15 years. Well, let me tell you what happened 15 years ago.
It was a real estate deal or something.
That's exactly what happened. Les Wexner used to own the property adjacent to Trump's Mar-a-Lago and sold it to this guy named Gavin. It doesn't matter. But this guy got in trouble with the law and had to liquidate his assets. So fire sale. And Epstein knew that Trump wanted these properties because if he got it adjacent to his, he could expand it into a large resort, which he ended up doing. So Epstein goes and gets Trump, and he's rubbing his nose in it because Trump was in financial turmoil. Everyone knew it. He's acting like he had more money than he had. And Epstein gave him a tour of the property. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And this is everyone, like whoever got this would be able to flip it. And it would have been extra great for Donald Trump because it's adjacent to property he already owns. He could add that on, and he really wanted it, but he didn't have the money. And Epstein was about to buy this and put it back into the Wexner empire, right, which was his financial parent, you could say. And Trump, through the Hyatt that he had invested in so much, combined with the Apprentice show that he pulled in, was able to pull the funds together and outbid Epstein by just like $1 million. And take the whole thing and flipped it for a huge sum of money. And so Epstein was livid and said he was going to expose Trump and how he didn't have any money. He was going to tell everyone how, we used to deliver you lunch when you were crying under the covers because you were broke, and he was going to embarrass him. So Trump decided, okay, he stuck the police on Epstein, even though Epstein had donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to Palm Beach. When he was at Mar-a-Lago, he actually hit on employees there, the daughters of employees, like their children.
Yeah.
Ghislaine Maxwell was hanging around the locker room of the tennis courts, and that's where they met Virginia Roberts and other girls, Jane Doe 2, 3, 4. They're all on the map. But they're telling, oh, yeah, you can be a traveling masseuse, and did it. She's 14 years old. And Trump knew that Epstein had been hitting on and recruiting and saying lewd sexual things to little kids and told the police. Well, police start putting a case together, and that's why Epstein went to jail the first time. was over what Trump had put them onto, and they follow him around.
He called the FBI even, right? He had called the FBI and did a long interview with them.
Mm-hmm. Told him everything, and they came out later and said Trump was the only one that cooperated with us.
Right.
Everyone else was paid off, hush hush, or compromise. Trump wasn't. Trump's into models too. Trump's in that circle. He married 3 of them, right? Nothing wrong with liking supermodels. Nothing illegal about it either.
Right.
Epstein liked the little kids with the braces with the ballerina look. You know, that's his thing. But MC2 Model Agency, which found a lot of famous models, and got models for Victoria's Secret and so on. That was owned by Jean-Luc Brunel, who also was sleeping with kids.
And who has gone missing in the last week.
And he's at large. He and Maxwell are probably in France with Roman Polanski having tea, talking about raping children. Roman Polanski, by the way, was represented by Alan Dershowitz also. Mr. I kept my underwear on. I couldn't have raped her. I kept my underwear on. That was his excuse. He's like, yeah, I got a massage. And yeah, I was at Rape Island. But it was a girl of age. And he's like, were there other things going on in other rooms with other girls? I don't know. Like, the house is so big. How would I know what's going on over there? Like, are there little kids in the house at all? Like, why? I don't have a bunch of little kids in my house. Do you?
Right.
Like, you know, come on.
He's a piece of shit.
Also, those in New York, the houses adjacent to Epstein, besides Bill Cosby, who lived across the street, talk about a dangerous neighborhood for kids, was real estate property of Mark Epstein, Jeff Epstein's brother. And that's where they housed a lot of these MC2 models. And so if you
Didn't the Clintons have stuff in that area too? Residents in that area? Wasn't it kind of like that particular area in New York pretty festooned with known predators?
Yep. It's they had a good thing going for themselves. And they could tell these girls, if you don't comply, if you don't go and they started with a regular massage and kind of scale up, they could kick them out of their house. Then they're homeless. They could take their passport away if they're foreign models, which most of them were from Eastern Europe.
Right.
They had a thing for blonde girls too. And Sarah Kellen was staying in Mark Epstein's housing. And she's in and out. She's actually in a video of creepy Prince Andrew poking his head out of the door as little kids are going in and out. I mean, they look like maybe high school, or under. It's disgusting.
I mean, it goes so deep. I mean, again, when you start talking about the layers of this, people don't know. We just said Christine Maxwell, who owned this software company, her husband was a gentleman by the name of Roger Molina. Mr. Molina ran a company called Leonardo, and he ran that out of the MIT Media Labs. And just the other day, the head of MIT Media Labs, I forget his name.
What donations?
had to resign because, and let me ask you, obviously, that's public news that gentleman had to resign because of Epstein ties. In this, Bates, I remember back in the day, Aaron Schwartz, who's killed himself supposedly, had hacked the MIT Media Labs and supposedly was suicide. What did he hack? Did he wind up finding out some of this stuff that that was going on there that he probably should have known? He got sentenced for whatever kind of hack he did, and then
I think one of the things they're working on is this stuff called microwire. And I have an interview with a lawyer for this case from the people who, this is a long story. His name's John Inacio. And so if people go to ANC report and type in microwire, you can see what they're working on and using university grants in MIT in particular. Right. That's one of the things. This stuff can change the trajectory of our artillery mid-flight and all kinds of fun, fancy military uses. And that might have been something they're after. I mean, MIT is the place to be when you're looking for the cutting edge tech and also brain power. So
I just found that association interesting. I mean, I don't know what he might have hacked, but that Roger Molina, and then Roger Molina's father, Frank Molina, was tight with Jack Parsons, one of the founders of JPL. And then, get into Jack Parsons and his tie with Aleister Crowley, et cetera, et cetera. It just makes for interesting conversation. You know what I mean?
I have to thank the Q community for pushing my first Epstein map. I got banned right after that until I physically went to Google, as we talked about in the beginning. Yeah. But they didn't grab the next ones on the financial stuff or whatever. I guess, with a month of me disappearing, they gave up on me or something. But I was posting on BitChute and whatnot, but my YouTube, I couldn't. I had 2 strikes, and I can't risk losing all my material, So
Right.
if I got it all fixed for now.
While you're on it, on people resigning, and there was also an official from Brown University who was suspended, who was connected to the MIT lab. Brown
I think
University,
it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
Do you think so? I mean, with him dying and they dropped the case, I wanted to ask you that. Do you think it's going to just go away?
Well, they're trying. I mean, how many people can you Clinton? Like,
but is that
Virginia
evidence all
Roberts is
gone?
still
All that stuff
pushing
they've
to
gathered
find
up?
Jesse Maxwell. Well, I mean, it's not all the evidence. They raided his house in New York. The FBI, even after Epstein died, still went to Little St. John's, still raiding the properties. They have his disc that he was keeping, his fake passport, a lot of his money. He did throw the bulk of his money into the 1953 trust, so that'll go back to the mega group. But this isn't over. Bill Barr is livid over this whole thing. They want heads to roll. There's still a lot of public eye on this, and it's up to us to keep this up, to not let it die. Like, yeah, you can't prosecute a dead man.
Right.
But what about all his cohorts, right?
Well, speaking of Bill Barr, I mean,
Maxwell's the main person anyway. Epstein was never the main.
In these conversations, everybody's like trying to just, kind of almost pull that shit out of pepper. Any tie, they just kind of run with it. I heard you mention on a conversation that Bill Barr's father, I forget his particular name, but he wound up hiring Jeffrey Epstein at this school, and he wound up getting fired, et cetera, et cetera. But you felt that tie was somewhat, I mean, just because they know each other, he didn't know necessarily he was going to be a pedophile. But other people would just jump to the
Donald Barr, but he got pushed out of the school.
Yeah.
And got replaced by Gardner, who also raped a 14-year-old. So the headmaster of the school that hired Epstein was living with a 14-year-old girl who was molesting. Same situation, no father, poor, she's like, oh, you can stay with me. And his wife was dying of cancer while he's cheating on her with a child. And then you've got Ace Greenberg, who's also been brought up on sexual harassment charges, head of Bear Stearns, hires Epstein. And his employees, they got bought out by J.P. Morgan Chase, and their employees are meeting with Epstein after he's been arrested for prostitution and pedophilia, and doing face-to-face meetings in Palm Beach while he's supposed to be doing prison time. What was so important you couldn't pick up the phone?
Yeah. Right.
And that's I fished that out in the map. The financial map is called Epstein Map 2 or something.
That was going to say, that's another one that people really need to check out, because that's how
it's the stuff he did.
The billions of dollars that was, and that collateralized debt obligation stuff and commercialized.
He set up a sieve, actually set up a structured investment vehicle to hide toxic assets for Bear Stearns by this company called Liquid Funding Ltd. In Bermuda. And Bear Stearns Dublin, as a way of getting around American regulations, sets up this liquid funding. Epstein is 40% of the cash and the chairman of it, and all they did was basically take on all these toxic securities. And then what Bear Stearns would do is they'd have the rating agencies and all come in and look at their books. Well, this debt obligation isn't on their book because they sold it to their subsidiary, and then on the first of the month they go and buy it back again. So they just temporarily get it away. So it's like a kid shoving all his toys under the bed and saying, "See, Mom and Dad, my room's clean."
That's where that Maiden Lane comes in.
Well, yeah. So Maiden Lane set up by the New York Federal Reserve, and they would be the senior loan for J.P. Morgan Chase. I think put up like 1.2 billion, and they put up 28.8 billion to buy them out. But a lot of this commercial paper that Epstein created in liquid funding ended up in money market funds, including J.P. Morgan Chase's. So I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars of it.
So what do you think? Obviously part of some of the conversation zeitgeist is they're going to let the economy collapse and cause a recession and blame it on Trump. There's all these rumors of what's going on at Deutsche Bank being insolvent, et cetera. So you're an economy guy. Do you see a recession coming? What's going on?
Not for those reasons. I think opening the discount window and messing with interest rates, we're looking at a massive housing crisis, but nothing like 2008. And the dollar's not going to collapse. I mean, American dollar is not backed by oil or any of the stuff. It's backed by bullets, and it just is what it is. If we collapse, so does everyone else. And it's the largest economy in the world. Everyone has a vested interest to make sure that it doesn't go belly up.
Right.
So those kind of exaggerations, it's fear mongering. I'm not saying they're lying. I think they're just wrong. I think they don't.
Well, and it kind of leads me to where we're going to close out. I mean, everyone's been talking about the dollar collapsing, invest in gold, et cetera, et cetera.
They say that every day.
I know that, but the larger.
There's nothing wrong with investing in gold, though.
I know. I'm just saying
that's not because it's going to collapse.
That's almost the older conversation, but now it's like they're getting rid of cash. They're everything's moving into cryptocurrency, et cetera, et cetera. Almost going back to Epstein a little bit. He had so much invested in essentially a lot of tech companies, eugenics companies, the supposed technocracy and transhumanism. Do you see any of that kind of being the next evolution of things? And
he wanted to freeze his brain and penis.
I saw.
Not someone that wants to kill himself. He wanted to live forever. They hung him.
But a lot of his investments.
Kill me. He had broken bones in his neck. There are cameras outside
that were disabled, of course.
To malfunction. The cops sleep through when they're supposed to be monitoring him. His own lawyers, who have been implicated in rape, took him off suicide watch. He's alone. His cellmate had been moved out when he's not supposed to be. You have all these coincidences that happen, and then he's dead for like an hour before they start working on him. I mean, it was on 4chan, screenshot. I mean, Alex McNabb, who's an EMT, was telling me that he thinks if a body had been cold for 40, 50 minutes, it doesn't matter how long they work on him, he's never coming back. Right. And then they spread this stuff and say, well, look at his ear and his nose, whatever. Like, if you shove something in someone's mouth and pull their lip down, their nose will curve. That's not a big deal.
That's another pulling that shit out of paper.
Capillaries in your face because you just got hung, your ear's going to be purple. It's not a big deal.
Right.
I mean, this body's there. It's identified by his brother. You can get DNA evidence of it if you had to.
But where's the funeral?
It's in Florida. They put his body next to his parents. You can't.
There you go.
It takes too long. It's too much to fake it. It's way easier to just kill him.
Right. That's what useless. I said. Pat, you were of the mind that he's alive. Pat's he's the.
Well, I mean, look. Here's the thing: is it's not impossible to think. Now, do I think it's likely? No, but it's not impossible to think that a guy who's got that much money that couldn't pay his way out of there. Certainly, when you start handing out millions of dollars to each person, that's going to get you out, and a Mossad operation comes in and throws a body on the floor and takes you out. I mean, it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. When he first got injured, my first thoughts were, oh, he choked himself a little bit to try and get a transfer because he's trying to get in-house arrest to get out of prison.
Yeah.
Right? Because he had minor bruises on his neck or whatever. But he told his own lawyers his cellmate had tried to kill him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, tried to. That guy wants to. He can't.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe he's worried someone's coming by or whatever. But if he's paid off. But, Patrick Ho was in the same cell. And he worked for both of them, moving around money to dictators in Africa. That's what he's in prison for. And
who was the New York fucking clearly on the roids? He took all the roids. Cop killer guy thing from New York, who they transferred out.
Like Carolina or Taryn something, but that was his cellmate.
Maybe they didn't transfer him out, and he killed him, and then transferred
they just let him in. Look, the cop opened the door and either did it himself or let the cellmate go in and finish the job. Epstein was a dead man walking. Everyone was making jokes about it. Like, that guy is never going to trial. He's just can implicate too many important people. He's got to die.
Yeah.
And Ghislaine Maxwell writes this snarky thing in her fake In and Out picture. That encryption in it, by the way, where she's reading a book about the CIA.
Espionage, right?
Yeah. And her father was drowned, right? She's obsessed with saving the oceans where her father died. Her father basically died for the state. And his eulogy was read by the Israeli prime minister. He's buried in Israel, and all the Mossad chiefs were at his funeral. Right. He helped capture Mordecai Vanunu.
Wasn't he supposedly trying to blackmail the Mossad? That was a part of what...
Well, he was in debt because he had been stealing pension funds, and he wasn't working for the Mossad as an agent. He was somebody in media who, a S&M type, who told on them because of his own Zionist ideology. And he knew when Mordecai Vanunu was reporting physical pictures of the warheads in Israel of their secret nuclear weapons program to the Sunday Times and papers in the UK, Maxwell, being in media in the UK, helped set up the honey trap in Italy that captured him. Another thing he did is he stole the Promise software from the DoD, which ended up becoming Pegasus, which is how they caught Khashoggi, how the Saudis caught him and killed him, was using that Israeli software to monitor his phone. By the way,
even
his uncle,
I was going to say,
Khashoggi,
he's even in it too.
With the rape tours and his headquarters in Spain, which Epstein's using a fake passport to go visit a bunch of times with a fake address in Saudi Arabia. So it's so much to say. That's what I've done 7 or 8 interviews and maps and stuff about it. This Epstein thing is huge. I've been talking about it.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but just before you go on,
I didn't start doing this in July.
No, hell no. Your shit is thorough, dude. But people do look up Palantir software, Promise software, and the other one you just mentioned, because that's really deep. I mean, this stuff just goes so much deeper than, like, again, child exploitation. All that is horrible enough. It really is.
It's the worst, and what's really sick is how many people cover it up, right? Like, we've had this before. Deborah Jean Palfrey.
Yes.
Jimmy Savile, like, you name it.
Right.
It goes all the way up to the top.
Have you seen the latest victim that dropped a YouTube video? Jessica something or other in the last day or two?
She was linking it back to the DC Madame, wasn't she?
Exactly. She mentioned her name. I mean, I don't know, I don't know if she was full of it or not.
She got suicided at her mother's house.
Yeah, like a day after she was on. I think maybe it was Alex or something. But she was
saying,
on
with Melonhead and said, "I'll never kill
myself," and then winds up hanging. And that's what freaks me out, bro.
Why do you go have breakfast with your mom and kill yourself in the back? No one would do that. Come on.
This is what freaks me out when I get so pessimistic, like nothing will ever happen. When things like that happen, like, hey, I have a black book that says all of this, and I'll never kill myself. She winds up dying. We're looking at Comey supposedly walking. Like, nothing ever happens. From your Bear Stearns in 2008 to Gulf of Tonkin, like 9/11.
But nothing ever happens because the press doesn't say anything. We have an alternative press now, and that's why
absolutely.
I'm telling people, fighting the censorship from Google and YouTube is the most important thing, because you can't report on any of the other stuff. I don't care if it's immigration or pedophile rings or war or whatever your thing is. You would not know about it without the internet. And right now there are a few realistically it's monopolies. So we've got to be able to have free speech online.
Right.
That's why, like, of all of the Democratic candidates, Tulsi's the best one because she's suing Google and she supports free speech. And obviously there's only one nominee on the other side, which is Donald Trump.
Right.
Donald Trump went after Epstein and he fired John Bolton. So he's on my good side today.
Well, this goes back to what Pat said about the internet, man, and Ma Bell back in the day. It's a utility now. You can't just... I know they have their guidelines per their particular platforms, but, like, they
don't even follow their guidelines. They just make it up as they
go along. That's what I was going to say. They're so arbitrarily. That's true. Yeah, and that's frustrating, man. But you're right. I mean, it is so ubiquitous. Everybody's on their phones and utilizing these platforms. We definitely want to be able to utilize them to get these kind of word out, because what's the alternative?
Yeah.
CNN, Rachel Maddow,
right?
and
how much information did you learn about the truth of WMDs and the rest of it online versus watching the talking heads?
Right.
All of them lied. Yeah. All of them lied about it. And all of them did Russiagate, even Fox to a degree.
Well, I mean, I'm not a fan of Trump, but, like, even in that 2016 election, there's no way he can fucking win. Polls say Hillary Clinton is so far ahead. I mean, it was just ridiculous. They all said it. You know what I mean? They all just ran with it. And it was so work. I mean, again, I'm pretty apolitical, but whatever,
they tried to do two sides of the same coin. Ron Paul, that's a wasted vote. Don't do it. She's got 91% chance of winning. Da, 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 da.
Watching the video in the Hillary campaign spot where she was supposed to have the party, and they were weeping. They were, like, putting their heads on their friends' shoulders. I could almost, like, gosh, that was beautiful, dude.
I wanted to be there with an empty cup to get the cheers.
It was so beautiful, and that doesn't mean I like Trump, dude. But
arrogance, just have a complete meltdown.
Yes, that's it. That's it. I'm not a pro-Trump guy, but their arrogance,
that's
the fact that
cocaine right there. Watching the Young Turks and Anna, the House Armenian, just completely lose it overnight and melt down.
I think Van Jones was crying. I think some of them. It was
turned back and forth from CNN to MSNBC.
It was great. It was comic relief. Like, fuck Def Jam. I don't need any stand up. This is
playing
perfect.
The ping pong between CNN and MSNBC. It was like a weird hour in Japan, and my grandmother and my mom and stuff were, like, on Skype. And, like, he's got Pennsylvania, and, like, each state that went red, we're just like, and I just wanted Hillary to lose. Like I wasn't.
And
that
that's
was
for
funny.
real. Yes.
Because she wanted to nuke Iran and all. She was crazy.
Is she not? Is she not quite possibly?
They don't want that to happen again. But you know what? He's gonna win again because the other side's got nothing. They got eyeball popping Biden, who likes to sniff kids' hair. And stuff.
Embolism in the eyeball. Yeah, that's crazy.
You know, Kamala Harris has the black vote all locked up.
Yeah, right. Is Hillary though? Is she quite possibly? Is Hillary quite possibly? I mean, just we all know Hillary and we all love her, but isn't she quite possibly the most unfuckable human being on the planet? Hillary Clinton. I mean, she looks like she smells like pee. I don't know why they're fixated on pee, like a hot bottle of pee, like in the summer that's been heated up, and it's just like warm, hot urine.
I can say as far as Kamala Harris, she posted on Twitter that if she wins or when she wins the election, she's going to put in new standards for the amount of meat Americans can ingest. And I said, and then I tweeted her and I said, what about Willie Brown's meat?
Regulating how much meat you can eat.
Had you not heard about that, Ryan? Did you not see that?
I did.
Yeah, I saw that.
When I went to London, I wanted to try some bacon. You got to search for it. They don't have it anymore. People think pigs are the devil or whatever. I'm like, give me a
Bill. Actually, one of my favorite comics, dude, Bill Burr, just released his special today that he recorded in the UK, and he did a little 3-part series while I was in the UK, just on how terrible the food is. Yeah, food is. It's the food in Ireland was great. I thought it would be similar to the UK. It's not. It's way, way better.
That's good.
I can't say UK. I can say London because I didn't visit the whole country or anything. I'm sure they have real food somewhere. But that city is terrible. Usually, big city, as much as I hate New York, I can't say the food's bad. Like, you can get anything there. They have good restaurants and whatnot. It might be pricey and all, but London, I mean, they screw up fish and chips. How do you fuck up French fries? You know what I mean? Like, it is so bad. It was so bad that after coming back from Dublin, I bought American cereal in the grocery store and just ate that. I'm like, I am not wasting money on another bad meal where they screw up the order and I waste a bunch of sterling. I'm not doing it. I ate cereal. I was looking forward to airplane food on the way home.
Ouch.
Wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
and that is not a joke. I was looking forward to the airplane food on Singapore Air.
No bangers and
mash. I had a
mash.
horrible time in London with the food too. You got to go to like an Indian place or something to get anything that has taste at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like I did get a free meal though from one of my shirts, but I was like,
one of my shirts.
I'm not gonna go off on London at the end of this thing. Like I did enough London bashing, but
I found that interesting.
Bad.
I found that was interesting because you hear the stories kind of anecdotally, but to hear firsthand.
I thought I was in New Delhi or something. And look, if I went to a middle,
you're like,
Eastern
and I've been to New Jersey.
yeah, exactly. I've been to New Jersey. There was so much filth and it just smelled like piss. It smelled. Coming from Japan, which is probably the cleanest industrialized society on earth, possibly, our streets are clean. We're spoiled, you know. I didn't have that standard. I've been to American cities. I've been to Washington D.C. I've been to the West Coast. It's pretty disgusting. I've been to New Jersey during the trash strike.
Oh, lovely.
People, we're walking around with masks and stuff.
Stings the nostrils.
New Jersey's not known for beauty.
No.
At least Jersey City. And it's got other good things in the state, but that ain't one of them. London was filthier than New Jersey or DC.
Wow.
I mean, it's like San Francisco level bad, so I hear.
Really?
Well, you did killer work, man.
They did a test on the McDonald's touchscreens. Every single one of them had poo on them.
I saw that, dude. That reminds me of that SNL skit back in the days. Like, you just walk around, everything's cool, but then you got on fecal vision, and it's just like splots of freaking poop everywhere. I'm
at Baker Street, like Sherlock Holmes, all that. Yeah, there's a statue of Sherlock Holmes. I think it's the only Anglo I saw. It's I'm in line behind Southeast Asia to get a ticket. I get up there, I discover, it doesn't take cash. You have to have coins, and cards don't work. So I go and buy a drink or something to get coins. There's a coin machine, but two homeless men are beating the hell out of it and won't leave it and hanging on it and stuff. Cops aren't doing anything. Nobody's doing anything. We get on a tube, go one stop, breaks. The one in front of it broke, so it broke, and I had to get out. I had a baby in a stroller. I had to carry it up steps because there's no escalator. Whatever stop is after Baker Street. And and it's like 40 degrees Celsius in these tubes. People are just yelling at each other, and I start laughing. It was like watching Trailer Park Boys, except it's not fake. Like they're all just reaming out their kids and screaming at each other, and like people dressed up in burqas, and the women have to walk behind the men and stuff. And I'm just like, this is where am I?
Fucking
is this
bizarro
London?
world,
like
dude.
All I read about in books and stuff, like
Wow.
I go to the Tower of London. They close early because they, the Shlomo's got to go out to the pubs or whatever. So it's supposed to end at 5:30. They close at 5:05. I just wanted to see Lionel Lee's armor and Marmaduke Dawson and stuff. I just want to go straight to the White Tower. Never got to see it, and I'm never going back, so I'll never see it.
Wow.
It was terrible, smelly, dirty, disgusting, overpriced. The food sucks. Logistics really suck. The tubes break. The trains break.
I mean, history will write about that, dude.
People were very polite, very nice. Food still sucked, though. But it was fine.
Such a hugely historic place transforming right before our eyes, man. And history will definitely write it as such, man.
It is just, it's all bobbleheads and curry and whatever. Like, and I would hate that if I went to Tehran and it was all white guys serving cheeseburgers. I'd be like,
Right.
where's the Middle Easterners? Where's the Middle Eastern
Antonio's
stuff?
Pizza. Antonio's Pizza. Tehran, Iran.
There's nothing European in London.
Right.
Except
no.
the museums. Yeah, they go in a museum to see what London was, and they're the same thing as America. They're taking down statues and all this stuff. Their heritage is being erased. It's sad.
Yeah.
And if you defend it at all, if you're pro-European at all, it's like, what? Do you hate the Middle East? I'm like, I've spent 20 years of my life trying to fight against wars in the Middle East and help Palestine, Iraq, etc. Don't give me that shit. Like, I don't want a complete cultural takeover of a historic European city. I think it's sad.
Well,
London.
Like you said, I think they want to get rid of the old and bring in a new that is in kind of their image. In my opinion, it's just new technocracy.
To have any kind of identity other than consumerism.
Exactly.
Then there's nothing. Well, that's the thing. It's you destroy the identity of a nation, and then they have nothing more to fight for. There's nothing left to fight for.
And I'm sure there's plenty of Native Americans who will echo that sentiment, quite frankly, because that's
what they're trying to do it here.
Defeated the Native Americans, aside from disease. They lost to the Western Confederation in military battles from Pontiac to Tecumseh. Then they started the welfare program, and that's all. The Indians were done. The reservation system destroyed them.
Yeah.
And the disparity of wealth between Native Americans on a reservation and not on a reservation, I'd love to see those stats. But just from like my life, I can tell you, it's night and day. The 3 deviations below the poverty line, it's all trailer park trash on almost every reservation. Off the reservation, you can't even tell the difference between any other American. It's
I have very close family members who were raised on the Pine Ridge, and it was all kinds of fucked up. So
Pine Ridge is all kind of messed up, man.
Yeah.
It's
bad news bears. Bad news.
Bad news, but it's welfare kicks dad out of the house and all that. This is another topic, I guess. But like,
that is. I mean, that's absolutely social engineering, man, and that goes on throughout the country, man. Get rid of dad, incentivizes producing more fucking kids.
Masculinity.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of layers to so much of this, dude. That's why I'm so glad to be able to have these conversations with my man Ryan. Shout out any social.
10 hours of this.
Yeah, I know, dude. I can't thank you enough, man, because I know. I mean, you are a very sought after guest as it relates to this subject and a many of subjects. So, dude, I mean, love you, brother, and I'm so glad you were able to take some time to come and roll with us today. Shout out any social networking. Where can we find some of your work? Definitely, I'm going to attach the Epstein map to the description of this video. But where can we find some of the other stuff, bro?
I'll give you the most updated map after this. ancreport.com is sort of the main place that will have everything else. And there's a donate button on there if anybody wants to throw some coins my way. I just had a very expensive trip to Europe. But that's there. And, yeah, that'll have my BitChute, YouTube, and article. Everything's on. ANC stands for anti-neocon.
Yes.
So ancreport.com. And we'll have this interview up there shortly. And
absolutely.
Thanks for having me on again. I'm glad to touch a little on 9/11, a little bit on Kaczynski, a little bit on Epstein. But we could go way deeper on all of those.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's so much to all of that.
You can add to your map, your Epstein map, Peter Cohn, who's the Director of Development for Computer Sciences and Data at Brown.
Yeah, there's a couple names. that I got to add. The tech sector stuff is actually a whole nother map. I just didn't have the energy. I got so demotivated after I lost YouTube. I'm like, well, why should I put all this time in to make a map that 200 people will see? You know what I mean? Like,
well, and as these flowcharts go so deep, people base the question like, well, just because he knew him didn't mean he was associated with all this other stuff.
No,
so we don't want to get into like
solid connections on here.
No,
like
absolutely. But it's just that guilty by association. That's a very fine line that we walk in, almost like you said, Donald Barr or whatever.
Don't Kevin Bacon this thing. Like, did they receive money? Were they a cohort in crime? You know, not just like I didn't list everyone that worked at Bear Stearns or something. I just got the ones that are involved in sexual escapades or met with Epstein in person and made a deal, or it's everybody on this map is solidly connected to Epstein.
Absolutely.
Not just someone that did whatever.
And check out Genie Energy. And the day before Epstein died, the documents came out that former governor of New Mexico and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, was involved with some of his stuff. But then the fact that he's on the board of Genie Energy begs larger questions as well. There's just a lot of digging, man.
So
you got to do the
Larry
homework.
Summers, who was also in the Black Book.
Former Secretary of Treasury under, I believe, Clinton, former head of Harvard, World Bank Association and stuff like that. And it goes again.
Obama admin too.
This goes beyond right left, and I've heard you said it before, brother. And we stress this a lot. The powers that be, whatever the fuck you want to call them, they don't care about what tribes we are, whether it's right, left, Jewish settlement or Palestine. Serbian or Muslim or Kurd, they don't give a shit. They use this shit to weaponize against us. So we play all against each other while they continue this insane racket of
divide
death.
The hoi polloi and make them fight each other.
Absolutely.
That's their goal. They'll use race, religion, gender, whatever they can get to get us at each other's throats.
That's what
but it's always been a class war. And we've got this group that engages in its own sort of tribal nepotism. And if in their minds, it's us against them type of thing. And they do it from the shadows. So sunshine is what they fear the most. They hate being known. They hate being seen. And Epstein, there are people begging the courts right now, don't put my name in this. Don't reveal me on this. Because whether they catch these people or not, the story's going to get out there anyway.
Yeah.
And everyone they're involved with, were they all going to hide? People don't want to just pack up and hide either, especially if you have families and things. You can't just leave.
Do you think the document, something yesterday or the day before, there's like something about 1,000+ names going to be released, something like that? Do you think
there's
that's
nearly
coming?
1,000 names?
Is that coming?
Well,
do you think that's?
I'm not holding my breath on that. I want that to come. I really want to say yes. I feel like the reporting about it coming is helping force it to come. Because if it doesn't, they go, hey, where's these names we were promised, right?
Well, or it just creates more conversation.
Comey
walks. Nobody gets accountable. And I was talking to Pat. I don't mean to extend this too much longer, but is Trump a white hat? Well, that baits, the Patriot Act is still law. NDAA 1 and 2 that allows indefinite detention and assassination without representation of no due process. That's still law. If he was strict Constitution, this would have been gone already. If this was all constitutional like says, and I'm not saying it's just about that, but those are some pretty heavy things as it relates to cats like Pat, right wing, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. These things are still on the books. He's still, as we know, Dilyana Gaitanjeva, who we're trying to get on and going to talk to, she's uncovered more information about
another one on Yemen,
we're just more weapons are going to Al Qaeda and are going to these Islamic fundamentalist groups. The proxy war is continuing, so it's like it's almost out of sight, out of mind, because we have all these distractions over here with these mass shootings, and that's kind of.
I wonder who he'll hire to replace John Bolton. I mean, a bucket of shit would be an improvement.
Did I mention that possibly his former chief of staff, Fred Fleet, is in the running for his successor? But as we close, my friend, moving into this election year, shit is crazy as it always is. In my opinion, we're seeing false flags everywhere. The deep state's in the corner, possibly. More people are getting hip to it. Epstein, I think, being killed was a mass red pill. Like I told you, my mom and my dad called me like, what the fuck is going on? People are just lay people are getting hip to it. Send it, yeah. So what do you think, man? What's going to happen? Are we hitting Iran? Is this just delaying the inevitable as far as hitting Iran and Lebanon and this global hegemony which continue, like Wesley Clark talked about?
They're too strong. It's not one thing that'll stop it is we can't stomach the casualties. Like the U.S. could take on Iran, but it's not worth what it would.
Is the war happening now more asymmetrically with these trade deals and economic? When you get into like China and ASEAN and what's going on in Southeast Asia and the One Belt, One Road? Are things happening and wars happening more trade and economically now? And a little bit of covert ops? We saw what happened with the Uyghurs.
It always starts to that. It seems like Israel is very close to pulling the trigger on Hezbollah, so that could be the next one. But Iran, their boat was released. 2.1 million barrels of oil go to Syria as planned. Turkey's still going to be fighting the Kurds in northern Syria, but right now, relatively, it's looking pretty good, compared to before. I would love the war in Yemen to end.
Yes.
It doesn't look like it. I'd love the war in Afghanistan to end, and that's the one I think we should pile on and do, because with Bolton out of the way, we have a real chance of removing troops from Afghanistan. And trust me, there's no reason to be there. We're just guarding opium. Just get out.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Trump
War,
seems to be leaning that direction.
That money's been flowing for decades. Why get out of there? Like you said before,
Because the
Vietnam
Syria
was
war,
one spot.
The writing's on the wall. There's no reason to finance ISIS in Syria because they're losing it.
No, as far as facilitating that heroin trade. Whether it's the French Connection or what's went on in Vietnam, or we've had it locked down in Afghanistan for years.
Yeah, but they don't openly admit we're in Afghanistan for heroin. The excuse is supposedly
for sure. Fighting. But if we get out of there, doesn't that kind of shut down a part of that trade?
Yeah.
So there's real no incentive to get out. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There's no real incentive to get. Like you said, we announced we might get out and meet with the Taliban, and then it was a car bomb that day or the day before. So it's same fucking playbook. But 2020, do you think who's the Democratic nominee? Do you think, and vice president? I heard Hillary's itching to get in.
I mean, I think Mr. BS probably has the most grassroots support.
Mr. Embolism in the eye.
Comrade Stalin, what's his name? Bernie Sanders.
You think?
Oh, God.
He's Biden, man. He's kind of like the Giuliani. He ain't gonna make it. He's too.
Jesus, and if Bernie's their go-to, I mean. Wow.
Oh, he's gonna get destroyed.
Kamala Harris and Bernie as running mates.
I know.
What's that one guy's name? Is it Wang?
Wang. Yang.
Wang.
Andrew Yang.
He posted that he was winning in polls when compared to Trump, and I was gonna write something, but I just couldn't.
Trump's
pick up
winning.
Something.
It's like.
Anytime they do that poll shit, come on, dude. That poll shit got played in 2016.
Oh, I know. I wanted to make fun of that guy.
$1,000. Like, you can't just give everyone $1,000 a month, bro.
Obama phone.
There's a lot of people, citizens in this country, who think they deserve it.
Well,
we live in a very interesting world, man. We live in such a great world, and I'm so glad to be able to have these kind of conversations because, yeah. You were talking about Ted Kaczynski, and I'm not likening myself to Ted Kaczynski.
Did you see this, by the way?
Yeah. But Ted Kaczynski... I don't
sell the shirt anymore because he's finally gone. It says Bolton must go.
And he's gone. But you were... hold on. You were saying how Kaczynski, like, he couldn't relate to people, like everyone was an idiot. And I'm not saying I'm Ted Kaczynski, but having these conversations makes me feel good. Doing this show with Pat makes me feel good because I realize I'm not alone in, like, having these conversations reaffirms that it does go so deep, and I'm not fucking crazy. And it frustrates me because nobody has a fucking clue. Nobody has a clue, and that's what allows so much of this to keep going, and it's frustrating.
Well, I think there are a lot of people that have a clue, but they don't. The field of politics is so hostile that they don't feel like dealing with it publicly, so they just keep it to themselves and not really out there expressing it. They'll vote or whatever, but they don't let you know that they know. You know what I mean? Because when you do, you got to deal with all the backlash from all the morons, right? So I think there are more intelligent people than we realize. They're just the quiet ones.
I hope so. It just seems like everything's... You're a professional wrestling guy. You've seen the video of the kid. It's still real to me, damn it. Talking about professional wrestling, and that's why I think people defend
more
this...
More real than politics.
Well, yeah, but people defend this right-left paradigm so hardcore because, their extreme tribalism, confirmation bias, etc. They just can't go beyond that. And it just sucks because the whole thing does go beyond that. I was listening to a video yours today. So much...
Yeah,
there's been plenty of conspiracies.
The ones they show you. It's like 60% are independent voters. The right and left are not the majority. That's just the one that's in your face all the time.
That's true. That's true.
Mm-hmm. They're going down. We're going to have a paradigm shift. Like, this happens if you look at broad historical trends. We're there. We're going to have a paradigm shift. The left is already starting to fragment into two different parties.
Are you of the mind that it's going to get worse before it gets better as far as, false flags? And, I mean, obviously everything will never be 100% just chill, but like you said, everything is so viscerally divisive with politics right now.
I think our low point was around 2002.
You think?
And I think we're getting better as we get more. We have a more vibrant alternative media than ever before. We can't get boots on the ground like we used to be able to do with the Second Iraq War. We are trying to get out of Afghanistan. We're talking to North Korea. We did downsize some troops in Syria. We cut off CIA funding in Syria. We didn't go into war in Venezuela, even though Bolton tried as hard as he could. Bolton just got fired.
But what about the kids who they've seriously weaponized as far as the Second Amendment, et cetera, who are starting to get into voting ages, who have no fucking clue about the nuances of this shit? They're just rolling with the kind of that AOC squad, just very social justice warrior-y. I mean, that's who I worry about, because I see them weaponizing the youth in this way, where it's like
those kids will change the first day they get a real job. All that Marxist rhetoric and all that stuff, the first day you get your first paycheck with taxes taken out of it, you're like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
I've asked people that, I argued with you on this and that, what was it that changed your mind? They're like, working.
Right.
So there you go. Yeah. You start realizing, you, your boss, whoever you're working for and stuff, you have to sell products or services, and that's how you get money, and then you just have to give it away to people who are doing nothing. That is the core difference between people who live in the real world and people who don't, or have fantasy jobs like being an actor or whatever. That's where the left resides. People don't live in the real world. When you get out of the perpetual students, which I call professors, and you get out of actors and stuff, and you have jobs, and you're really working for a living and really having to earn that money, it sucks to have to give it away. They're talking about expanding healthcare to illegals, except for Tulsi Gabbard. All the other Democrats are like, yep, let's see. You take a middle-class family that can barely pay for their own health insurance or health care, and you're going to tell them now you got to pay for Pablo's? They're going to be like, build another wall. We can't extend social benefits to the entire third world. It is economically not feasible. It doesn't matter how big a bleeding heart you have, how much you want to do it. That's not going to work. If you really want to help those people, stop predatory lending, stop warfare, get rid of NAFTA, get rid of the lopsided trade agreements, prosecute white-collar crime. I wrote a long list of things that you could do that would help fix the third world so that they don't have to relocate poverty. You can just not be in poverty. I mean, we know it works. Capitalism. And they don't have it. That's what they need. That's their number one enemy. Antifa and all these things, they're all communists. You scratch them, you can see the red underneath. They hate capitalism, Westernism, masculinity, nuclear family, traditional values. They hate these things because they work. And they want that free lunch. They have that entitlement attitude and want to demonize everybody with isms and ists and prejudice. They're the ones that are obsessed with ethnicity and race. And I don't think about that stuff in my day-to-day life, right? And I live in a 99.99% of the people around me are not my group or whatever.
So are you a citizen of Japan, or they're on a certain visa, or what?
I got a 3-year visa right now. I used to every year or so I'd have to get a visa. So people are like, don't you have a marriage visa? My wife's actually Korean, but we live in Japan, so we both. But yeah, because I have children here, I get a visa, and I'm working. And I worked in Japan. I had work visas when I was, and I still do part-time work in Japan. Gets me longer visas usually to do some work in Japan. But obviously, I'm doing journalism on. That's not. It's kind of both because I'm spending my money here and da. But yeah, you can legally immigrate to Japan. Just you're gonna have to work your ass off, learn another language, because they need. And I don't blame them for having the strict immigration rules they have, because if they didn't, it would become China overnight.
Right.
And I'm not saying China's bad. It's just, why do you need Japan to be China too? You can go to China and see Chinese stuff. Japan deserves to have Japanese culture, Japanese language. Preserve their way of life.
Same with the UK, like you were talking about.
I would hate for Osaka to become Beijing, and I don't want London to become Islamabad or whatever. There's nothing racist or anything about that.
Right.
Wanting to preserve a culture is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want anyone's to disappear. I've seen that happen to American Indians. Language is gone, culture gone. Like, that's sad.
Right.
And I don't want that to happen to anyone else.
Race
British.
preservation isn't necessarily race separation, and people don't quite get that sometimes because it's all fused through that kind of.
Well, it doesn't even, in the case of Japan and China, it'd still be the same race, but you'd have a completely different culture. So
Right,
it doesn't even
yeah.
matter what the race is. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you had a whole bunch of Ukrainians flood into Germany, it wouldn't be German anymore. If you had a bunch of Germans going to France, it wouldn't be French anymore.
Right.
A lot of Germans went into Rome, and then the Roman Empire didn't exist anymore.
A lot of Germans after World War II sort of disappeared into South America, didn't they?
Well, a lot of scientists ended up in NASA. Paperclip.
That's
and
true.
whatnot.
Which is the whole.
I got to
other
bounce,
crap.
guy. I got another interview.
No,
Sorry.
absolutely,
Okay,
man. Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, man. Ryan Dawson, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be reflective, think, research on this 9/11 day. Let's get it together, ladies and gentlemen. Peace. So much love.